to express personally heartfelt sympathies to the family and friends of Samuel Barker, a pupil of Osbaston Church in Wales Primary School, who was tragically involved in an incident this week. And I would like you all now to observe a minute's silence for the family and for this young boy. Thank you. Would you all please remain standing? I'm going to invite our chaplain, Canon Sodi, to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. We remember before you, good Lord, and entrust to your keeping those who have died recently, among them those who have died tragically. Especially we name before you Samuel. May he know your peace and experience your resurrection hope. Father, be near those who serve or have served in the forces of the Crown. May they feel you near them, to comfort them when distressed, to be their companion when lonely, and a refuge in their grief, and in the end to see you face to face. These and all our prayers we offer up in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. It's my great pleasure to introduce our guests this afternoon who've been invited along to take part in the re-signing of the Armed Forces Covenant. Also our town mayors, and for some of whom this may be the initial signing. We have with us Lieutenant Colonel Gossage, who is going to sign the covenant with me, Captain Bell, Colonel David Hammond, Emma Ashmead, who's been involved with this for some time. Where are you, Emma? In the gallery. Hello. And our own officer, Joe Skidmore, who's done a considerable amount of work. He said he was going to be in the background, and he is. Where are you hiding, Joe? He's there. Thank you. We also have with us the Mayor of Abergavenny, Councillor Tony Koniecki, the Mayor of Caldicot, Councillor David Evans. The Mayor of Chepstow will be joining us shortly. He's on his way from another meeting. The Mayor of Monmouth, Councillor Richard Roden. And the Mayor of Esk, Councillor Christine Wilkinson. So welcome to you all. And I would like to thank everybody who's come along to show their support for this very important occasion this afternoon. What will happen is I will invite the Lieutenant Colonel to join me to sign the declaration first of all. Then we will individually invite the mayors to come along to the table here, which Joe has prepared for us, to have the signing to take place. And then at the end we will have some photographs, and we will have a short break to rearrange the chamber. So now I will pass you on to the leader of Monmouthshire County Council, Councillor Peter Fox, who will be saying a few words about the Covenant for this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and can I also extend a welcome to all of you here today. And it's great that we are back here collectively together, because the covenant is something really important to Monmouthshire. Many of you will recall when we signed it back in October 2012. a very important occasion where we recognise our armed service families within the community, and how we as organisations together can level any barriers to progress in any area where we could be and should be working closely together. And we've made great steps over the several years in forwarding that relationship and working closely with our armed forces colleagues. And I too like to thank Joe for the work in arranging this, because today is also further symbolic by having our town councils present to jointly share and in this important occasion and to sign that covenant. I don't know if there are any other regions across Wales, certainly, where we have that unity of purpose here today to work collectively with our armed forces and their families and the communities around them. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here today, and for this council to witness this really important moment where we reaffirm that commitment and hopefully look forward to a really powerful and strong continued relationship over the coming years. We never forget the work that our armed services do on our behalf and have always done, and no doubt will do in the future. And it is so important that we recognise and help certainly those families and those veterans when they come back into our communities, and we make sure all is done that can possibly done. So a big welcome, Madam Chairman. I look forward to the signing.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Can I now invite Lieutenant Colonel Gossard, if you'd like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. I think really I've just got a short couple of things to say. I just want to say I'm very happy and I feel very welcome to be invited here on behalf of not just the armed forces, but also the veterans community, the families and the cadets across Monmouthshire to represent all of those elements of the armed forces in the covenant signing with the council and also the mayors. And I had to think about, I don't think I've ever been in a room with so many mayors before. So I had a bit of a think about what might be a collective noun for, so I came up with a chain of mayors. Yes, somebody else got it as well. So, and I think that's but more seriously, the armed forces across Monmouthshire really value your support. Without the support of the community, particularly with my own regiment as a reserve regiment, we would be unable to function without that link with the community. In fact, the history of my regiment goes back hundreds of years to a point where, as a militia, we were indivisible with the community. And I think that is still the case among most of the reserve regiments, and certainly the soldiers who are in the regular regiments as well look back to the counties that they come from and still feel a really strong bond. Somebody told me the other day the Monmouth School for Boys is the 5th largest provider of officers to Sandhurst. So that's all, across the whole army, the 5th largest, which is a fantastic thing for them to give to us, as it were. So really, that's really all I've got to say. Just to say these commitments are incredibly important to the people in the armed forces, and I just want to thank you for your ongoing commitment to the armed forces and service families in general. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Can I now invite you to join me in signing the covenant? We'll go through the alphabet, so can I now invite Councillor Tony Koniecki, the Mayor of Abergavenny, to sign the covenant. Can I now invite the Mayor of Caldicot, Councillor David Evans? Just Can I now invite the Mayor of Monmouth, Councillor Richard Roden, to come forward? Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite the Mayor of Est, Councillor Christine Wilkinson, to come forward, please. It would appear that the Mayor of Chepstow has been delayed, so I'm going to ask if Councillor David Davies, a long-standing member of Chepstow Town Council, would be willing to sign the covenant in his place. Thank you. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm now going to invite our Chief Executive to say a few words. Thank you.
Before I speak in earnest, there's a gentleman to my right that's asked me to remind Council that the good school of Chepstow has provided at least one officer to the Britannia Naval College. And now he will hate me for a good few days. To follow that, all I would say is to our guests, it's an honour, it's a privilege, but it's an absolute joy to have you here. This is a symbolic moment, but it's more than a symbol. The covenant stands for many, many things, but the really important thing is how we bring it to life. It's a commitment on behalf of this council, this county, and all of our principal communities to do whatever we can for serving and veterans, actually, in all of our military forces. And I think, Lieutenant Colonel, you caught it beautifully. When I joined Monmouthshire, I very quickly realised the strength and the feeling for the militia within this county. It's very real, and we've experienced losses over the course of the last decade or so. So the prayer today, I thought, spoke beautifully to that. But the word for me that you used was indivisible. I think if we hold that as an outcome from today, that's really what we're fighting for, isn't it? We want our servicemen and our servicewomen to feel that we are always with them, to feel that they have a home to come back to. And regardless of whether they're in operations or not, they are part of something which is more, actually, than their regiment, even though their regiment in itself is a massive sense of belonging. So thank you for spending the time with us. And I think we're now going to invite you all to join with the chair for the official photograph, if that's okay. Thank you.
Right, can I just say thank you once again to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Members, can I have your attention, please? Can I just thank you all once again for joining us for this very important ceremony this afternoon. We're going to rearrange the chamber now, so we will have a break, but thank you all very much indeed for your presence here this afternoon. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you, members. Could I have your attention, please? We are now ready to reconvene. Thank you. Ooh. Well done. Thank you all very much. Right, we're now going to go on to our agenda. And the second item is the apologies for absence, please. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. 3 apologies from Councillors Penny Jones, Brian Jones and Bob Greenland.
Councillor Petruni.
Harris.
Councillor Taylor. Couldn't see her slide.
Councillor Blakeborough, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor.
Linda Gilpies, Chair.
Thank you very much. We haven't received any public questions, so we'll move on to item 5, Chairman's announcement and receipt of petitions. And I'd now like to introduce Michelle Daltrey from Disability Sport in Wales, who's going to address the Council.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet, thank you very much for the invite to attend today. I guess it follows really nicely from the signing of the Armed Forces Covenant today, in that you spoke earlier about community cohesion, about inclusivity, and about everybody feeling part of a community and society. At Disability Sport Wales, our ambition is to ensure that every person with a disability or impairment, their family, their friends, and all their connections feel wholeheartedly part of everything that's involved using sport and physical activity as the vehicle for that. We launched the In Sport initiative in 2012 as a benchmark to support local authorities, national governing bodies of sport, and clubs and community groups across Wales to understand what inclusion actually means and how to embed that in policy, practice, but more importantly within the culture and the ethos of all that we do. It's been a real pleasure to work with Mark and with the team through Mon Life, and the recent investment through Council and into a service which is normally one of the easier ones to cut has been a real pleasure to see. So it's great to see that happening. The In-Sport programme is there just to test and to challenge, but also to support, in this case, Monmouthshire, to ensure that all your provision is inclusive. So seeing the journey of Monmouthshire through this has been an absolute pleasure. Mark and the team have worked very hard to challenge ourselves, to challenge inwardly, and the benefit of that is seeing disabled children, disabled adults, those that acquire injury, that may be through forces service, getting the absolute best services available for them. So, Chair, it was an opportunity really to present the award and to thank you for your progress to this point.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I accept the award, would the Cabinet member like to say a few words?
Thank you very much. Well, this plaque is recognition of the great work that the Mon Life team have been putting in promoting inclusivity and diversity. But if you can hold it up for a moment, look at that. It's also a challenge. There's a gold medal missing there, and that's the challenge that we aspire to over the next few years. So that's the standard for our team that we want to be able to achieve. It's key to ensuring our commitment of playing a significant role in building sustainable and resilient communities that every resident in our society is able to play a part and no one's left behind. And in the work we've been doing in promoting our leisure facilities in particular, we're very clear that we want everyone to be able to benefit from those facilities. We're a very inclusive and diverse council, and we want to make sure that no one's left behind. This ultimately means that Mon Life active staff can work across the spectrum of disabled and non-disabled people at every level, so that people can fully participate in the leisure offer that we have. By achieving this standard, opportunities are widened. We feel that participation will increase, that disabled people have the opportunity to become more active and engaged, and that we can really get to the stage where we have a nation that is hooked on physical activity and no one is left behind. and we feel that the work we're doing is helping to achieve that cultural change in attitude, in approach, and also the provision that we've got of physical activity to ensure that everyone is able to access those opportunities. So I'd like to thank the Mon Life staff for all the work they've been doing in achieving this award, but I also look forward to that challenge of achieving and aspiring to secure that gold award as well. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Councillor John, and congratulations to everybody concerned. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 6.1, Caldecott Leisure Centre refurbishment and Chepstow Gym and Cafe upgrade. Councillor Richard John is going to introduce this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last year we reopened Monmouth Leisure Centre after a £7.4 million renovation. This delivered a new gym, a new 25-metre swimming pool, a spa area with a jacuzzi, steam room, sauna, treatment rooms, virtual fitness classes, a cafe and a soft play area. The benefits to our local community in the Monmouth area are considerable in terms of both mental and physical well-being, in terms of tackling rural isolation, loneliness and tackling obesity. The new centre has also been a great financial success. The number of memberships has trebled, while the centre's income has more than doubled, to such an extent that next year we're anticipating the leisure centre will return a surplus for the first time. Most council-run leisure centres operate at a six-figure loss, so I'm really proud that next year we see the prospect of this centre generating income which could be reinvested in services. Our ambition through Mon Life is to raise the standard of all 4 leisure centres in Monmouthshire to this standard. And today I'm proposing that we move to the next stage of cost certainty on a preferred model for a complete renovation of Caldecott Leisure Centre. The centre was built in the 1970s, and while there was a partial renovation in 2005, our offer is in need of modernising. This new centre will complement a 21st century school in Caldecott and forthcoming investment in the town centre, investment to match the town's growth in demand for housing alongside the abolition of the 7 tolls. The report before us includes 3 possible options for the centre's renewal. Our preferred option proposes a renovation within the existing building. This model retains the sports hall, reconfigures the entrance and reception area, and introduces a new viewing area. Male and female changing areas would be reconfigured to create a poolside changing village, while a sauna and steam room would also be introduced. On the first floor, we propose converting the studio space to a large 60-station gym with a toning suite, with also a spin and dance studios. We also propose a refurbishment of the outside skate park. The report identifies 3 options, including demolish and rebuild on the same site, but we believe that this would be financially prohibitive. Remodelling within the existing shell delivers better value for money for local residents, but it does mean that we have to ensure that space is used to maximum benefit. This leads us to some really difficult decisions about how we ensure that that space is used to the maximum benefit of as many of our residents as possible. The squash courts take up nearly 130 square metres and are up to 4.6 metres high. For 80% of the time that Caldecott Leisure Centre is open, the squash courts are not used. Today's decision does not rule out future squash provision at the centre, but we are clear that based on our preferred model, we believe the courts do not make best use of the space. We want the new leisure centre to be a community facility for the whole family and of maximum benefit to the Sevenside population. I believe that the addition of soft play will be of great community benefit and will also bring in significantly greater income, which can be reinvested back in frontline services. This report also recommends a £30,000 detailed study of Chepstow Leisure Centre to establish options for a renovation and renewal to bring that leisure offer up to standard. Now, this includes the design and concept reports, architects' drawings, and a full feasibility study. And of course, we look forward to drawing up plans in the near future to renew Abergavenny Leisure Centre, alongside our plans for a new 21st century school on the site of King Henry VIII. At a time when many councils are cutting back on their leisure offers, I'm pleased to say that today's report is another step on the road towards ensuring that all 4 leisure centres remain at the heart of our communities and that they have an enhanced leisure offer for the well-being of the people of Monmouthshire.
Thank you. Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'm very pleased, as because it's on my party anyway for a start, but I'm very pleased the Caligor Leisure Centre is having some much needed finance put into what is a necessary refurbishment. And what many members, if any at all, don't know is the fact that in 1974, and it's before my time in Caligor, but I am aware of it, the Caligor Town Council decided, they agreed to finance the community suite element of it. And the cost of that then at that time, I believe, was around the £45,000 mark. So if Caligor Town Council hadn't gone into debt, as it happens, or like a mortgage then, for want of a better term, that community suite would never have been put there. So we pleased as a town council, that we have been at least part of the success of that leisure centre. And to repeat what I said, we are pleased that there's money being spent on there. And, we got the skateboard park next door to it and that, and there's a number of facilities around there, the choir hall as well. So, it's in a good place. And I'd like to see it supported a little bit better, but I'm beyond the squash court issue, but there are plenty of people there who will take part. The only thing I want to say about it is this: I'm just wondering if the access to it from the town centre is like around. You've got to go up past the doctor's surgery, up Mill Lane, and then into it. I'm just wondering whether, at some point in time, once the town centre renovations are completed and the contractors move off that site, which is adjacent to the Caligor Comprehensive School, whether a footpath could be put somewhere along there to make access a little bit more easy for people to get to the leisure centre.
Before I invite any more councillors to speak or comment, can I ask our officer Ian Saunders if he'd like to comment on this? Would you like to come forward? As well. Yeah, fine, thank you. Who would like to speak? Who's going to speak? Lovely. Would you like to introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Clewitt, Managing Director of Alliance Leisure. This is my colleague, Julia Goddard, who's the Senior Business Development Manager looking after this part of the world. I'll talk to you a little bit about us very briefly show you a few schemes that we've done. Not Monmouth, as Councillor John mentioned, it's a great development. I understand that most of you have seen that. We've now worked with you as a council on 5 projects through the sort of design, build, fund part of our business. And on an ongoing basis, we work with your officers to help with the marketing support. which is part of the regime, which I think has been the great success of generating the additional turnover and participation that you've enjoyed at Monmouth. We've been going for about 20 years, and our space where we work is just in the public sector. To date, we've been responsible for helping place about 170 million into public leisure schemes. Not all quite as successful as yours, Councillor, but generally speaking, they have been very successful. And a lot of that is because of the front-end work that we do, and you alluded to that around CHEPSO and the model that that creates. I think a couple of things that we're well regarded for is a look at innovation, and I'll touch very briefly on that again in a moment. And the other part is about this affordability. What we recognise is the importance for leisure facilities to become much more financially sustainable in the future if they're to have a chance of surviving. So our model is very briefly that we scope the projects out, and that's in our world business development. We then go into a position where for some level of contribution from the council, we get to cost confidence, which is where we've achieved at the moment with Caldecott. The next stage, and again, as Councillor alluded to, is to secure the funding to get to cost certainty and then deliver the scheme. So I'll just really briefly run through a few bits and pieces that we've done. And I remember 2.5 years ago sitting in this chamber and councillors asking me lots of questions about, will Monmouth really look like a proper leisure facility? And I hope that what we've convinced you of is that actually by spending the money wisely, we can get you to a fantastic facility in an economic way. So very, very briefly, Saltaire Leisure Centre, where we won a national award for innovation. We did a £4.5 million conversion, and it's to give you a sense as to what £4.5 million will achieve, taking it from a very tired old centre, changing the facade, improving reception to make it a much more welcoming environment. The food and beverage offer, again, taking from tired environment to a much more refreshing offer. Reusing sports space, and this is quite relevant for you with the matter of squash. That this project in Lancaster, we took half a sports hall and converted that into play. In this instance, it changed the revenue model from about 80,000 to about 320,000 of revenue that was driven by changing from a sports hall to this type of facility with the exciting soft play that you see. The development of fitness is extremely important to you for a revenue perspective. You talked about 3 times the growth of membership. That type of achievement is not unusual, but is absolutely pivotal to you to create the sustainability. Inventive fitness space. We're looking at a spa-type facility in the facility. So about creating great space, great quality, putting toning in there, which makes the centre much more inclusive for a wider part of the community. At Real, again, a fairly small scheme, but again, just making the facilities much more relevant. Similarly at Barking in London. Within Leisure Centre, again, a modest investment, but actually directed in the right direction. It means you can achieve a lot for your money. Again, down the road, Cwmbran, over in Exmouth, 2 modest refurbishments. Ramsgate, somewhat more meaningful. We added a swimming pool to the side of the facility there. And D-side, going back about 5 years, converted the centre there with the old ice rink and put a lot more relevant stuff in there, which again had a similar effect to what you've achieved at Monmouth with transforming the landscape of the funding. And then finally, just show you the other end of the scale, where we've delivered about 10 months ago the new facility up in Rill, which was a 17.6 mil new development. Anyway, that's enough of all the stuff we can do and what things look like before and after. I'll pass to Julia now just to talk you through the vision for Caldecott.
Thanks, Paul. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we can do, and you've obviously seen what we've done at Monmouth. Now, Caldecott is a very different building to Monmouth, but the brief there was very much that we would like to achieve the look, the feel, the innovation that we did at Monmouth at Caldecott. So working with the officers from Mon Life, we've come up with a scheme which looks to renovate the front entrance. So the area that's grey at the moment with the small area on the left, that's a new entrance area. At the moment then we're trying to create this look and feel that we had at Monmouth, where you have the reception as you go in on your right-hand side, and then you have a dual servery with a cafe that serves both a soft play and external sort of reception seating area. So where you see the pale blue and the red, that would become the cafe and the kitchen area and the party room. The big green hashed area on the top left, that would become the play facility, which would be 2-storey. That's currently where the squash courts are. And then the sort of yellow area is seating area for the soft play inside, and then there's also a seating area and a viewing space which overlooks the learner pool. We're then looking to create, again, a nice village change as we've done at Monmouth. So the bottom green boxes, that's where the village change will be, and that will feed straight through into the pool. We're also, where the blue area is where a sauna and a steam room will go as well. We're also looking to do an uplift into the pool, so just to make the ambience of the pool more modern. And then on the first floor, where the green area is on the bottom left, that will become the new fitness suite and toning suite. And we're looking to put some windows in the front of that to give it a nice elevation. The yellow area is where you'll come up from the ground floor, with on the far right, that's the current gym at the moment. That will become the studio. The bright blue, that will be a spin studio, and then there's some changing rooms that will service the whole of the leisure centre. So these are obviously images from Monmouth, but we're going to try and create the same look and feel within the confines of Caldicott, which structurally is very different to Monmouth. So there will be some structural walls which will work around. So there you can see the look of the changing village that we'll try to create with a sauna and a steam. Fitness suite's already been sort of designed into the space that we showed you earlier with the toning, the spin, and the facade. So we've got an opportunity to try and uplift the actual aesthetics of the outside of the building. So you can see the top right is a image of another site we've done, where we've just opened up that front to give it a nice lift, and so you've got views out of the fitness suite as well. As well as that, we're also looking to put some external changing rooms outside, which will service a 3G and also can be used by the school children. So in terms of costs, at the moment, the whole cost is coming in at RIBA Stage 2, which we call cost confidence, at just under 6.3 million. The next stage of the process is to move towards cost certainty, and the costs to get to that are up to £245,000. So that's where we go into more intrusive surveys, more detailed design, more detailed costings. We go out to the market and get the cost back, so that then by the end of RIBA Stage 4, as we did with Monmouth Leisure Centre, we can say this is the cost that this facility will cost you. In terms of timescales, should you wish to proceed, currently we feel we should be able to open this by the summer of 2021 and start on site in September of this year. There's a lot of work to do before we get there, but that's the programme that we're looking to achieve if members wish to proceed after today. And then very quickly, in terms of Chepstow, I think we probably delivered Chepstow going back some 10, 12 years ago. It needs a refresh of equipment to modernise it. And should you then decide at a later date to do some with Chepstow, that equipment can obviously be moved from the site anyway. It's the mix. The mix of equipment nowadays has changed, very much a more functional equipment as well as standard treadmills and strength equipment. And then also to, I suppose, enhance the entrance at Chepstow. So I think you can see the images up there where you see the outside and reception area, and it's to maybe create a nicer, more welcoming reception area, possibly a Costa Coffee or a cafe area mixed with it. And that's the scheme at the moment and the extra addition that you'd like for Chepstow.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saunders, would you like to add anything? Thank you very much. We'll go back to members now for questions. The next member I have on my list is Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I welcome this report, and I think it's quite positive, but I do have some reservations. And one thing Councillor Higginson mentioned was the access. Going back to the time when we developed the Astor development, part of the plan was to have a facade, a tree-lined facade from the town centre down to where the leisure centre is. That is something we would still look to... Am I wrong? That was something we'd still like to see move forward, as Councillor Higginson said. There were three options in this report. One, that's just roughly 6 million, 8 million, or 12 to 14 million. I'm of the view that having spent £7.4 million in Monmouth, of which at the time, due to budget constraints, I think £3 to £4 million was moved from Caldecott to Monmouth, and I think maybe it's opportune time to look at the surplus that Monmouth is making to support a development of Caldecott a bit greater than the 6.2, maybe the 8.4. The pool is a 20-metre pool. It's been there 50 years. I don't know what the plumbing is like underneath, but I believe that it would be opportune to look exactly what that is like to go for another 50 years. But equally, could we create a 25-metre pool from the 20-metre pool? You mentioned a surplus in Monmouth, but nobody says what the surplus is. There is plans to consider a skate park, and you also mentioned in the report that some changing rooms would be on demountables. Well, I think a bit of a backward step myself. I think demountables should be put back in the locker and something more permanent in terms of demountables. Really, I don't know whether we can come back after the debate has moved on or not, but I believe that we should be looking to, personally, to go to the 12 to 15 million job, knock it down and start again, because I think there's a lot of work. I think there may well be a lot of work needed on the pool, which might contribute a greater cost. So I don't know whether other members in Caldecott feel that way, but I would go for to look to the greater good, because if we can make the surplus in Monmouth of what we don't know, I'd like to know what that is. Perhaps we could make it the same sort of surplus in Caldecott and really repay the expenditure that will go in for the future. As Councillor John said, the tolls have gone on the bridges, the population of Caldecott is increasing, and in terms of use, I think it could compete well with Monmouth. It could compete well within itself. If we get Chepstow on a balance, we could work together with Chepstow. We could compete with Celtic Manor. So I think we should be a bit more ambitious and look for the greater scheme with a view to invest to make, and invest to produce profit in the future, and look to Monmouth using some of the surplus to support our aims in Caldecott. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Becker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we welcome the idea of these improvements and also the crumbs from the table to look at Chepstow. I think it's important, though, with facilities that are this good, they don't mean anything without communities. So when you're looking at things like the fact that you're increasing the charge for the non-profit community-led swimming club in Chepstow by 20%, putting that club in danger of even running and giving access to our communities to those facilities, I just want to know, do you feel like that's part of the joy of the opportunity of revenue generation from these facilities by actually removing access to them? I think we need to be very careful about what we're building and who we're building it for. So I welcome them, but not at the expense of giving access to our community to them.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Councillor Easton has mentioned a number of my concerns, so I will be brief about some of those. I am also rather concerned about the pool and the fact that we do not appear to be doing anything apart from a cosmetic improvement on the pool. I am a regular user of Caldecott Leisure Centre. I regularly swim in Caldecott swimming pool. My children have their swimming lessons in Caldecott pool. And frequently, in the wintertime, it has to shut because it cannot maintain the temperatures when the temperatures drop. So if we are not investing in the mechanisms to keep the pool operating, then please could this be looked at a little bit more closely, because there is no point in having a leisure centre if the pool isn't functioning. So also there's the squash facilities. I totally understand how popular soft play is. Again, I'm a mum. I have spent more than my fair share of hours in soft play centres around the county. I think I've been in all of the ones in Monmouth. I've been in them in Newport. I've been in them in Cumbran. I know what how important soft play is. But that demographic we're appealing to there are young children, getting young children active, and that's great. The squash facilities are actually for the older generation. So we're taking away a facility for the older generation and instead giving it to children. So can we please also look at what our offering is to older people, people who may be slightly more set in their exercising ways, and can we ensure that we do not get rid of all squash facilities in the south of the county? We need to make sure we are serving all of our residents, not just the ones who are the profitable bits, because we all know that parents will pay a lot of money for a soft play session. But we do have to make sure we are, as a council, giving an offering to all of our residents, and that includes the ones which may not be quite as profitable. I too have great concerns about how we access into the leisure centre. It is right around the back. It feels awkward. There isn't any flow through, so that one definitely does need to be addressed as time goes on. But I really do welcome the news about the skate park. Right from the very beginning, when I first became a councillor, I was working with Caldecott Town Team, and we were having meetings with the young people who actually use Caldecott Skate Park. I've never known a community meeting like it, when we had 25 young people all in there, in their gear, and telling us about how important the skate park was to them. The skate park in Caldecott is absolutely falling to pieces, and sometimes I do fear for its safety, although I regularly make sure people have checked the safety on it. But it is great that we are actually looking to invest in that area, and that's really, really important, not just in terms of it being good exercise, but also it's a facility that keeps our young people in a safe space, it gives them something to do, and I think that generally helps in terms of how we approach youth activity. And making sure we don't end up with any antisocial behaviours. So I think it's really, really important, and I really welcome those aspects. I too would really like to see one of the higher levels of spending being assessed further. It seems like Monmouth has been an excellent investment. It's about to start bringing in extra revenue for us as a county. Let's not shortchange ourselves by underinvesting in Caldecott. It's a growing town, it's a vibrant town. Let's make sure we don't just dismiss it out of hand. Let's see whether actually by putting in that little bit of extra money, the 8.3 million rather than the 6 or 5.5 million, then we can actually, let's make sure we get the right value for money for what we're actually spending, and whether that actually is a good long-term investment for the county. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I've said this before, I'd like to commend the council for retaining these facilities, because there are many councils that don't retain them, and these are an essential part of the community, as well as you know, for sport, well-being, health, all of those things, they are essential, I think. If I had a choice, my personal choice would be to build a new leisure centre, but I do recognise, even though I'm a member of the Labour Party, that producing a wish list doesn't actually make things happen, and that you know, there's a lot more to it than that. And being involved in several projects myself, there is usually some compromise involved within those projects. But I do have some concerns. Some of them have been raised by the other members about the swimming pool, because we want Monlife to be successful, but we also want this to be a community centre that people can utilise. And the reliability of that swimming pool could have a serious effect on whether people come to use that facility or not. So I think, you know, we need to ensure, because we've all made similar mistakes and not invested in things that perhaps we should have and then regretted it later. So I do recognise that, you know, we have to compromise. I think it's great that we're talking about investing in this sort of thing and not talking about what we can, you know, what we can cut and what we can't do. These things are essential. And I do know from, I visited Monmouthshire Leisure Centre and I've met with a team of Monlife there. And I think perhaps what a lot of members don't appreciate here is the amount of social work that goes on in the community by Monlife, and you know, the social return on that investment is great, in my opinion. I think we need to, and I've made this point to the leader before, we need to use those council facilities we have, you know, much better than we do, because they are there paid for by the community, and we know that we have various social issues that we're going to talk about shortly, and I think we can get much more value for money by using some of those facilities better. But in the absence of the bonus from Brexit, which is yet to come, I think we all have to compromise, and I'd like to congratulate the Council on taking this forward, and I hope that it's going to be a great success. I'm sure it will be, but you know, let's not spoil the ship for an ape with a tar. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Batruni.
Yeah, mine was more a technical question. Everyone else has sort of raised the concerns I wish to raise, particularly the demountable changing rooms. I think we need to revisit that in all seriousness. It just gives a different vibe. You know, if you want to encourage people in hearing demountable, even if it looks good, it just feels wrong. The longer term investment, I've read the document, I can't see it, so if it's there, I do apologise. But to ask you the technical question, is it better to spend more now for longevity purposes? Will it last longer? Will the facilities last longer? Given the innovation that happens in the world generally, will it, you know, if we could create a space that could adapt and innovate itself as leisure facilities change over time, would it make more sense to invest now, like financially, prudently, to invest now on a new building, say, or spend, you know, less now to redo it, but then only to have to do the same in what, 15, 20 years time? I think that's Councillor Joe Watkins's point. Is it worth thinking about investing now for more? Does that make sense, to spend less in the future?
Would you like to respond to that at all? Are you able to respond to that?
There isn't a simple answer, I'm afraid. There are compelling arguments in some cases to new build. There's compelling arguments to do facility upgrades, and I think that the modelling that's been done to date has shown that the most affordable option in the sort of longer term is about the significant enhancement. I think where it perhaps starts having some of the disbenefits that you illustrated, and it is where people start dabbling and thinking 100 grand here, 100 grand there suddenly changes what a legislature looks like. And I think what you've seen at Monmouth is for a fairly substantial sum of money compared to the complete new build of that site. The new build of that site probably would have been sort of 15, 18 million, that sort of quantum. But if you put the money in the right places, you can create something which really is fit for use now and for the foreseeable. I think a lot of the...
Just for the foreseeable, what time frame are we talking? 20, 25 years, just for my reference?
I think what we will be doing as part of the next stage, when we do the detailed investigations, is we will be able to test that out and actually give you an answer. For me to sort of shoot from the hip on that, I think would be a little reckless. But I think what would be fair to say is that there would be no point in us progressing beyond that next stage if we thought there were fundamental issues. And the reason I was saying earlier on about the one size fits all is because so much of it is around the structure of a building. That if the structure itself isn't sound, to shove even 100,000 in, you'd question the value of that. So it's got to deliver value for money, and part of that assessment at the next stage is ensuring you've got lifespan in the asset.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks for coming along and talking us through that, and thanks to Monlife team for their vision as well. And you know, let's not do ourselves down. And it always amazes me when we're talking to spending millions and millions of pounds in communities, how there's voices saying how you know, don't let the Caldecott down, don't let the area down, let's short-change Caldecott. I remember Caldecott 20 years ago when I started as an elected member, and we have invested in Caldecott a huge amount. The £45 million school there is a fantastic, it's taken a long time, but we've got that there. We've got £10 million we're going to be investing in the town centre to refurb that, to make it that vibrant place that Joe referenced. Let's make that into reality, a vibrant place, so that we have the footfall and the people who really want to come and visit the area. With being an executive, being a leader, being part of the cabinet and having to be responsible, we have to look at best value for our communities and for the monies we spend. Monies we spend additionally in one project and monies we can't spend in another area. So it's actually how do we achieve the best value and the best opportunity for our investment. And many years, for as many of those of you who've been in local government for a long time will know, just as Richard shared, how often leisure centre facilities, leisure facilities were a money pit. They were a drain on many authorities, and probably still are in many cases, and need massive subsidy all the time to keep them going. What we're talking about here is turning that around, and we've already seen the benefits of investment in a special way in Monmouth, and I believe we can do it here. £6.3 million is not to be sniffed at. Put that into context. You know, you can build a whole brand new primary school for £4.5–5 million. 6 million, this is not peanuts being spent on an old barn in Caldecott. This is a fantastic investment, a huge investment which needs to be welcomed. And sadly, yes, there are sometimes things we have to give to be able to put something else in place. And you know, I know with reference to the squash courts, and I hadn't really understood actually the usage and the opportunities of that could be lost through not actually utilising that space in the future in a far better way. And that does give us a dilemma. So how do we address those users and regular users of squash courts, and how do we signpost or help them move to carry out their sport in a different area? And that's a piece of work we still we'll need to do if we move ahead. I'm conscious a lot. Today we're only it's a big decision. We are going to recommend us to invest, you know, over £250,000 in that next stages of development to it, which is a big commitment in itself. And but whilst I see the arguments of you know, perhaps we should spend the £8.5 million, just bear in mind, you know, when you borrow another £1 million another £1 million of capital, you've got a 25-year burden of probably £60,000 or £70,000 to service that. Right, that's money which could be invested in somewhere else, or service capital for somewhere else, or it goes into the next project. You know, we're one of the smallest authorities, we've got the least amount of financial resources across all authorities, yet we're doing these big things. And that's because we're prudent and we do it sensibly, but we can't be reckless with the money because it's public's money. So it's important that we do the best we can with what we have. And I think, you know, we're not shortchanging that community, and I live very close to it. And I'm a member. I pay a monthly sub to the Leisure Centre. As you can see, I don't use it as often as I ought to, but I will do. I know I will do very shortly. But you know, it is a fantastic facility, and it deserves, and Caldecott deserves that input. So that you know, I only wish now we had a deeper foresight, perhaps when we were doing the school, and we should have perhaps thought more about that at that time. But you know. Yeah, but that was a big, significant project in itself. However, whilst Caldecott, you know, it needs tidying up in many ways. I just want to praise that facility as it is mine, even running as it is now. It's a great facility. Don't get us wrong. This isn't a bad. You go inside there, and I've used the equipment and things in there, and it's a lovely place. But it could be just so fantastic. And I think 6.3 million isn't skimping. This is actually putting something fantastic in. So, Madam Chairman, you know, as much as we'd all perhaps like a brand new build, we have to be real in this world. And, you know, when you're responsible for people's money, you've got to be careful how you spend it and spend it in the best way. And I think 6.3 is being prudent with the public's resources.
Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see money and resources being given to MonLife to start to carry on that work that we have asked them to do in the public's name, and I commend that. We've got 4 leisure centres in Monmouthshire. 3 have been mentioned. The one that I belong to, where I am a very frequent user of the gym, and I would commend it to the leader of the council as an activity. It's not been mentioned yet, and so I'd just like a very quick word for Abergavenny. because I fully accept that the Cabinet member mentioned it in the long-term context of the 21st century schools rebuild, and I fully accept that. However, the current situation in Abergavenny Leisure Centre, particularly in the gymnasium, is that the facilities are totally inadequate. Not a single week goes by without me being harangued in the changing room by fellow users who know I'm on the council and who say, can't you do anything about this? Very often, the very limited number of lockers are all used, and I will leave it to your imaginations to think of the queue of naked men waiting to get in the shower because there are 2 showers. I know it doesn't really bear thinking about, and so to address that, I would simply ask not for anything other than a simple look at existing facilities, and in the interim, before a major scheme, could nothing be done for those frequent users of that gym and that leisure centre who find the facilities just do not match the current demand? Quite a simple and, the important word, cheap request. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to blot out that thought in my mind now. I'll retain my focus on the swimming pool. I see that the costs associated with the swimming pool are £175,000, but there was never, I can't see anything that relates to a complete new pool. And I'm a little bit kind of concerned about that because Caldecott has always historically had a really strong swimming club and produced some really good swimmers over the years. I know that from my own experience, friends of mine that went on to swim for Wales and so on and so forth. And I feel that Caldecott is a little bit shortchanged here on that facility. So I would urge the council, in light of that, to understand the significance of that amenity and look to spend a bit more on a swimming pool. But my question is, what did you actually look at that, and what were the costs specifically associated with building a new pool?
Would you like to respond to that?
I obviously didn't know.
Yeah, if you were looking at a new swimming pool, you'd be putting about £3 or £4 million on the bottom line of this. So we did sort of early look at what was within the envelope we were talking about. Clearly, you can go to different levels, as Paul said, with the different schemes they've done in the past. So I think extending that swimming pool, it's not an option. You don't extend the swimming pool, you have to put a new swimming pool in. So that would be an additional £3 to £4 million on what we've got now.
I just want to be clear, though, just for the overall public scrutiny. I appreciate that's a broad figure, but was there any time spent on looking at that specific facility and then the specific costs associated? You give me a broad figure, I don't doubt you for a minute, Ian, but did you actually spend any time looking at that?
I think what we did is look at other facilities, the cost of other facilities. So Alliance Leisure deliver these products week in, week out. They know the cost. So I think by the very association that we know roughly what the cost is going to be, but we didn't actually put a bottom line figure on a new pool at Caldecott.
Councillor Howarth.
Yes, and good afternoon, Chairman. First time up today. Yeah, I've got no issues with progressing to the next stage. The only thing I would say to officers and to the team which are going to bring it back to council for a final recommendation is let's not make mistakes twice. And I always remember the 4G out in Caldecott where we progressed with that project, and actually it cost us a lot of money after. So I will never sign anything off here unless we have it right, and I think a few members in here will remember that. Not many members will, but we will remember that. So my point I'm going to tell the team is when you do have your final projections, we need to make sure that is it. The leaders made it quite clear there that we don't only have one pot of money. So this project, whether we go for the 6 whatever million, I will not agree to anything above that, because at the end of the day, we're paying people to make a target figure for us to agree to, and if we go over that target figure, why should this authority take the can for that? The swimming pool, yeah, you made a very valid point there. We need to move to the 21st century with facilities. If we don't have them facilities, we won't have people going through the door. Martin, you made a great example about Abergavenny. That is the crown jewel in all this. We was here 2 years ago talking about shutting leisure centres. Now we're talking about investing in them. Without our schools also, we don't have leisure centres, if you think about it, members. The schools actually probably keep our leisure centres alive if we did a full audit of what keeps them alive. Is it the public out there? Good luck to Monmouth. The public may be going in there, but we have to keep them alive, and we have to build everything without the schools also, because that's not going to last forever. I look forward to the final report on which scheme we take, but you will be heavily scrutinised on it, because I will not agree to anything talking big money of doing things when we haven't hit the nail on the head at the start. Thank you.
I'm going to ask for a seconder now for the recommendations. Is everybody clear? There are two. Councillor John, did you wish to say something?
Shall I respond to some of those questions that have been
Absolutely,
raised?
yes, please.
Is that okay, thank you. Well, can I thank members for their contributions this afternoon? I want to pick up on some of the points that members have made. Firstly, Councillor Howarth made the point about schools accessing their local leisure centres, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity that schools are able to use their leisure centres for swimming. It is compulsory at Key Stage 2, although some of our schools choose to offer swimming to other pupils as well, and that's the school's choice to do that, and I hope that they're able to continue doing that. Councillor Grocott made I'm sorry you're being harassed in changing rooms, but as I made as I stated in my preamble, we are committed to upgrading all 4 leisure centres to the same standard. So we see Abergavenny Leisure Centre being refurbished in line with the 21st Century School proposal, which runs from 2019 to 2024. I would envisage renewing the leisure centre within that same window. Councillor Watts made the point about the swimming pool. I mean, there are many strengths of Caldecott swimming pool. I mean, the L shape that you've got there means that you can have different groups there using the pool at the same time. The bottom bit of the L is often used for lessons, and that's a great feature of that pool. But you know, we have to pay our money and make our choice. We're in politics to make some difficult decisions, and this is one of them. There are other options on the table, but you have to make a difficult choice, because money we spend on this project is something that can't be spent elsewhere. If we were to go for the spend up to £15 million, as Councillor Eason advocated, that's at least one, if not 2 other leisure centres that are not going to be renewed. You really have to pay your money and make your choice. I'd like to thank Alan Davis for his comments, and he's absolutely right that there are threats to leisure services at the moment, particularly given the challenging settlements that local authorities across Wales have been given over the last 10 years. There's been an inevitable focus on education and social care, which has given councils some very difficult choices. So some councils have decided to close leisure centres, or have opted to convert their leisure offer instead of being council run. There have been some really difficult choices, but I think we've made the right choice here, and we've shown through the investment in Monmouth that you can make leisure centres work and be sustainable, and that's what we want to roll out to the rest of the county. Councillor Watkins had some specific concerns about pool closures in Caldecott. I'll look into that and I'll write to you, if that's okay, on that specific concern. And on the issue of the squash courts, again, it is a difficult choice, and if we were proposing in this refurbishment to remove soft play that's used by families to put in squash courts, we'd be criticised equally for that. So there are some really difficult choices. And for me, the overriding issue is not profit, although clearly that's an issue, because we want to deliver value for money. We want as much money as possible to be able to reinvest. and ensure that these services are sustainable. But the fact that that enormous space, 125 square metres, and considering the height of the courts as well, that space is not being used 80% of the time. That space we could use with other facilities that could be used by, could be of great benefit to the community. I have a bit of a problem with Councillor Becker's point. We're not offering crumbs off the table to Chepstow. We've said we want all 4 leisure centres to be of the same standard. We can't renew all 4 at the same time. So this is the first step. We would be, there's a journey to refurbish and bring Chepstow up to standard. But this is the first stage in establishing exactly what the need is in Chepstow. You look at the gym equipment and it's obvious that needs replacing and bringing up to a modern standard. Chepstow was, until last year, Chepstow was the leisure centre that was upgraded most recently of the 4. But we recognise we want all 4 to the same standard, and that includes Chepstow. So I'm really pleased, actually, that we're able to start Chepstow's journey today. Councillor Higginson made the point about access, and I would hope that as many people as possible, given the central location of the leisure centre, that many people in Caldecott do choose to walk or cycle there rather than using their cars. Although, as I say, we are looking to improve the state of the car park as well. Councillor Eason made this point as well, that somehow Caldecott is being shortchanged here. £7.4 million was spent in Monmouth, but actually we're investing more money in Caldecott Leisure Centre than we invested in Monmouth, because a lot of that £7.4 million was money from Section 106 contributions. Some of it was money from Welsh Government because of educational use. So actually we're putting more money into Caldecott Leisure Centre than we put into Monmouth. This is a full renovation that we're proposing with extensive new facilities. This isn't a sticking plaster. You saw the detailed presentation earlier. We're being really ambitious in these proposals. So don't think that because we're not splashing the cash and spending £15 million that we're not being ambitious for our leisure services. If we were to spend that £15 million, you would rightly accuse us of being much less ambitious for the other towns, because we would be depriving Abergavenny and Chepstow of a 21st century leisure centre. So you pay your money and you make your choice. And I think the proposal we've put forward is robust. It will ensure that as many people as possible can benefit from these leisure facilities, which has enormous benefits for the mental and physical health of the people we represent. So thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions. I'd like to thank Alliance Leisure as well for coming in today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I made about the money going to Monmouth, and 2 questions. One, what did Caldecott College cost? Didn't cost 45 million, but in the rebuilding of Caldecott, it was necessary to send money from the Caldecott project to the Monmouth project. It was between £3 and £4 million. That is what I mean by being shortchanged. I think it's really time that could come back to Caldecott. That's the point I'm making. Money did go to Monmouth as a necessity because of the groundworks and everything that's needed there, which at the beginning wasn't really considered. That was in the last council before we came to us, Councillor John. The other point of clarity is the consultants have got in a report an error or the something not right. Based upon other projects, then a new build would cost between 12 and 15 million pounds, yet it's quoted this afternoon between 15 and 18 million pounds. So let's look at the lower level. But just to clear up as far as I'm concerned, my comments were correct as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Councillor. Noted. Can we now have a seconder, please? Councillor Feakins, and we will vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? We're just checking to see if it's unanimous.
Yeah, you just ask for his hands up. It's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Can I add my thanks to our representatives from Alliance Leisure for coming along? Thank you very much indeed for your time. Right, can I have your attention now, please, councillors, for the next item on the agenda? Item 7.1, Diary of Meetings, which is going to be introduced by Councillor Paul Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Council calendar needs to be approved annually to ensure appropriate governance arrangements are in place for the year, enables members and officers to forward plan effectively. You'll recall that 2 years ago, when this item came to Council, it was resolved that Democratic Services circulated a questionnaire asking members to express a view as to the timing of meetings. The result was that the times remained the same. I'm minded that members have caring and working commitments, and also we should seek not to discourage potential councillors in the future. With these issues in mind, I would propose, firstly, that we keep the dates set out in the diary for council and committee meetings, and secondly, that the 8 full council meetings remain at 2 o'clock, and that members of each committee decide the timing of their meetings at the first meeting in the new council year. There may be issues where members may be members of both or 2 committees that meet on the same day, and in that case, I would suggest that the chairs of each committee liaise with each other. Save for the foregoing, I'd recommend that we approve and accept the meetings set out in paragraph 2 of the recommendations of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Fox?
Yeah, I'd like to second that. And this is one of those agenda items that each year we know could turn into something very long-winded and actually not really important in the scale of things that we do have to deal with. So we tried to preempt some of that in the additional recommendation there. And very clearly, many members here, the dynamic is changing in the council all the time, and the pressures on individuals, their home lives, their work commitments and family commitments do alter that dynamic. And it's really important for me as leader, and I know all of you, that we afford every opportunity for all members to contribute the best way they can and as often as they can within our meeting structure. And whilst we've had debates over the years about timing and things like that, we know it still disadvantages, our current system disadvantages a lot of people for various reasons, which no doubt we'll hear today. And so I think there's a duty of care for all of us to listen to those strong messages that come from individuals and their circumstances, and for us to bend some of our own thinking to enable those people to take part. We shouldn't be selfish in our own desires, what helps us personally. We should work as a group, as collective groups, and as a council to try to make the best of the membership we're very fortunate to have in this council because of its dynamic nature and its diversity. And it'd be very easy just to revert to the old traditions constantly. And whilst I accept that we've had the debate on these formal council meetings, and perhaps we are where we are on that, the flexibility, having flexibility for select committees to liaise with each other, to create a timing in the day which can make the best use of individuals' times and work-life balance and childcare and all that, that shouldn't be beyond the wit of man. And I hope that we can find a way forward which helps as many people as possible. And clearly not everybody, we will not find a solution which manages everybody's situation. But with the level of attendance we are seeing in many committees, has been disappointing at times, and that's not necessarily because of lack of commitment. It's due to pressures of work-life balance and children care and a whole range of different things like that. So, you know, I happily second that recommendation of creating some flexibility and letting certainly those select committees and any other committees which have the flexibility to make their own decisions, to come up with a decision in their first meeting within in the new year, and then set that through the year, and they're at liberty to review it whenever they wish. That's the, you know, that autonomy should be granted to those committees to do stuff. And that may cause some issues now and again and some clashes, but you know these things we can find a way through. But Madam Chairman, I'm hoping, with fingers crossed, that this debate doesn't go on for 2 hours. But it may do. But let's hopefully, we've had this debate so many times. We understand the issues. We can find a sensible solution forward without having to spend too much time on it. Thank you.
I think for clarity, it would be helpful if Councillor Jordan repeated the additional recommendations so everybody is clear what we're debating, because this in effect is an amendment to the original recommendation outlined in the report. So if you could just clarify, it's been proposed by Councillor Jordan and seconded by Councillor Fox, and this is what we want to be sure we know what we're debating.
The first point is that we will keep the dates set out in the diary for full council and the dates for the committee meetings. So the days won't change in the calendar. However, what I'm saying is that with the 8 full council meetings, they will remain at 2 o'clock. And then we're going to leave it for members of each committee to decide the timings of their meetings at the first meeting they have in the new diary of the council.
Thank you very much. I thought that would be helpful for clarity. The next person we have down to speak is Councillor Grocott.
I'm delighted to say that I fully agree with the words of the leader. But I would also make the point that while it is vital that we have an effective diary for members, that it is equally important that where there are timetable and diary commitments on officers, that those deadlines and dates are always adhered to. There have been occasions during my time on this council when the work of scrutiny has been damaged by a very late arrival of a report from a senior officer, either presented on the day itself or on occasion deferred, even though it has been well known for quite a long time that there was the expectation that that committee would be able to scrutinise the report. So yes, I fully agree with the leader, but would also urge that the same things apply to senior officers meeting their deadlines in order to support effective scrutiny.
Thank you. Can I just remind members we're talking about our diary at this current time, but that we note, I'm sure officers note your comments. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I concur and support everything that the leader has said, but we must try and avoid to change any meetings. We've had a bad year this year, particularly with the election, but many members are having problems with their IT systems that will not be getting the information of changes in good time. So we need to keep to the diary, but equally we also need to look at the position of members' IT systems, which are failing quite a lot. Perhaps Councillor Egan's most likely can concur with that, because he had a lot of problems.
Right, before we go to the vote on this, does anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Dimmock.
Just quickly, Chair, thank you. I work full-time for a telecommunications company in this county, and it is a struggle with the 10 o'clock meetings. My day is cut in half. It is imperative that I set my engineers up for that day. So I do ask members in the committees, when people request for later meetings, you do consider it for us full-time working councillors. The pressures on both the business and myself are immense, and it's also difficult handing over to someone when you're going to pop out for 3 to 4 hours. You know, it's hard to run that business, but it's also hard for me personally to manage projects at the same time. So please do try and work with each other. I'm not asking for every week, every month, for the meetings all to be changed to 2, 3, 4, but I'm asking it be alternated so it works for everyone. You know, if we want to get more younger people involved, we need to work with them. We need to accommodate those timings for parents, for carers, for working members. Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but the member to my right said he'd be disappointed if I didn't. But it's a yearly rant. But I am grateful for the suggested amendment. I think it's sensible. And as I pointed out to colleagues earlier today, the meeting times haven't changed in this diary since I was first elected to this authority 21 years ago, which is rather disappointing given that change in dynamic. I'd echo Lisa's comments in that Monday mornings are the very worst of all options, in that they, certainly for me, in that I have to allow an hour to travel back and forth from work, virtually write off a day, and that's not something I can reasonably claim as a civic duty for meetings only 3 hours. And there are some scrutiny meetings I would actually like to attend, but just accept I can't do so. And likewise, I should thank Councillor Davies in his role as chairman of the, I can't remember which select committee is chairman of, but certainly it's made a difference having the LDP strategy meetings in the evening, and I've been able to attend a couple of those, as I will do the one next Monday, so it is much appreciated when that change is made. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watts.
Maybe I'm going to upset members, but I think the nature of the beast of being a county councillor is that you acknowledge before you stand, or you should have a broad understanding of the kind of commitment that you're making. I take Lisa's point, especially if you're trying to hold down a full-time job. You know, myself, I'm self-employed, I can be flexible, I've got 2 kids effectively, so I try and manage that, as most of you do. And obviously I've got Pauline who used to sit down, you know, that I care for her as well. But we try and accommodate as best we possibly can. And I think we have to be mindful of that. We can't please everybody, and I think it's a hell of a job to try and do such that. I think Peter's right. Just on the IT issue, I think the IT in this authority is shocking, and we do need to address it to accommodate those changes. My computer, which I think used to be Claire Marchment, I mean, who wants Claire Marchment's ex-computer, is completely kaput today. So I've still gone back to paper. So we really do need to address that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Batruni.
Just to echo Councillor Dimmock's and Howard's point, I work full-time, and I did know what I was getting into, but we have to think about the future. I hear about now, but also the future, and I would think it's true of all political parties. It's struggling with young people, struggling with people who work full-time, and actually it's good for democracy generically if we accommodate people who work full-time with all different political opinions. And I just think, like, as you said, it's not beyond the wit of man to get this done. I didn't know it hadn't been changed for 21 years. Is that what you said, Councillor Howard? Timings hadn't been 21 years, and that just says it all, really. We can do this. Let's accommodate not only this generation, but the generations that are going to hopefully stand for us, for all of us, in the future. And we do want to accommodate all these different experiences. It's great to have people who are retired, but also people who are working and with young families give us so much a different perspective, a different view of life. And I think we should do that. And you know, the simple change of 10 a.m. I mean, wow, how we haven't done that years ago, I have no idea. But when it comes to the voting, and I echo those words, we are the minority of people who work. So when it comes to the voting, we'll be outvoted. So please think of us when it comes to the vote about accommodating us and our working lives. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Councillor Howard for promoting me from Vice Chair to Chair of the Economy and Development Committee. And I'd like to take all the credit, but Councillor Pavia there is the Chair. And even though we cover the role jointly, I think Councillor Pavia has instigated a lot of changes in order to accommodate people. We can be flexible, and I think we just need to communicate with people, and obviously we've got to take into account the role of the officers, because, you know, they've also got a life to lead as well. But I think it is very possible to accommodate people. We just need to get together and talk about it and come to a solution. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Very briefly, Chair, and I won't repeat the arguments made by Councillor Dimmock, who did so very articulately. I just wanted to say, though, I know this is about times and meetings, but let's not forget about the ability to access meetings via digital technology. We've got the digital technology in place. Let's use it. I dialed in or Skyped into my first community council meeting the other day. We're doing it elsewhere. We should be using that technology to a better effect here. So when you look at this as committee chairs, as committees, please also look at the ability to use Skype to access those meetings.
We're going to finish off now, Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It does seem as if I'm pushing at an open door here, but the proof of the pudding will be when it comes for the members to vote. And incidentally, there is money in the capital budget to improve and enhance the digital facility that we have here. We've changed the constitution to enable remote access to meetings. Let's make sure that money is spent and we take full advantage of it.
Thank you. Right, we're going to vote on the amendment now, which was proposed by Councillor Jordan and seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour of the amendment? That was unanimous, so it now becomes a substantive motion. Can we now all vote on that one, please? Thank you all very much. Didn't take 2 hours after all. Right, we now move on to item 8, which is the council tax reduction scheme. Councillor Murphy, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as members will know, the purpose of this report is to present the arrangements for the implementation of the council tax reduction scheme and to approve it for the coming year 2021. And to affirm that in the absence of any revisions or amendments, annual uprating amendments will be carried out each year without the requirement to adopt the whole council tax reduction scheme. Just to point out that a failure to adopt the local scheme by the 31st of January will result in the default scheme being imposed by the council, and that's something we've had to consider every year. The Welsh Government's regulations do not contain any significant changes for recipients of council tax reduction. Claimants can receive a reduction of up to 100% of their council tax bill depending upon their income and household circumstances. These regulations were for implementation during 2013-14, would you believe? It seems like yesterday. Financial year only, and the Council resolved to adopt a new scheme for subsequent years in accordance with the new regulations approved by Welsh Government. Council approved the discretionary areas to be applied following public consultation, and it's not proposed to change any of them in any way. So unless anybody's got any questions, Chair, as there's no amendments to the plans that we've already had over the years, I recommend the approval.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Jordan, thank you. Councillor Watts?
Just that's all well and good. I'm just interested in whether or not Councillor Murphy's done any research on the uptake of the council tax reduction and how, you know, in the last, what did you say, 2013, Phil? If there's been an increase in people using that facility, that financial facility.
I haven't got it to hand, but I see in my screen that Richard Davis is in the back, who actually administers the scheme for us. So I don't know whether you can get... I'm going to say, I don't know whether you can get close enough to a mic, Richard, or whether you want to come down, but I'm sure you can answer that.
Would you like to come down? I think it'd be easier to, please, yeah, so we can pick you up on the microphone.
So I'm Richard Davis. I'm Head of Revenues and Benefits for Monmouthshire and Torvine. We run the shared benefits service covering the two authority areas. In terms of the numbers of people receiving council tax reduction, 5675 is the current number. So that's around 15% of households in Monmouthshire, just over 15%. It's gone up slightly since the introduction of the scheme, about 150 claims overall since the scheme was introduced in 2013. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Petruni.
Yeah, it was just to confirm how much the Welsh Labour government contribute to the council since the Westminster government cut it by 10% and then passed it down to the Welsh government. How much do we receive from the Welsh government to make sure it's 100%?
The overall figure is across Wales is £22 million that's contributed by Welsh Government towards the council tax reduction scheme. Monmouthshire as a council receives 6.6 million or thereabouts, 6.8 million, right. So within that 6.8 million there is a supplement that you can say is contributed over and above by Welsh Government. DWP, when they transferred the benefit, restricted it to 90% of that value.
So Welsh Labour government, 680,000 to Monmouthshire?
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who wishes to comment, ask any questions before we go to the... Yeah. Right, do we have a seconder? Did we have a seconder? Paul, sorry. Right, we've had a proposer from Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Jordan. All those in favour of this recommendation? That was unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Davis, for joining us and answering the queries. Right, we now move on to motions. 9.1, we have a motion from Councillor Petruni.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This, Chair, is a motion that was submitted, I believe, in October now, but due to consultation constraints, and I believe the general election might have been a contributing factor in that as well, it has been submitted for this council. And it relates to the Mountain House decision, which I believe was made last week or a week and a half ago. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Wake up, Dimitri. Yes, the poverty one. Skipping ahead. This, well, again, relates to last year, actually, Chair. I submitted a motion in September of last year around poverty, relating to a commitment made in the social justice strategy to develop a poverty action plan, which I had asked for several times last year and was told by email by officers that there wasn't an official one, there wasn't there, they couldn't send me it. So after months, maybe even a year of asking, I got sick and tired of hearing that and decided that old motto that to do if you want something done, do it yourself. So I wrote a strategy. It took me 3 months. It's not perfect. It's not complete. And I would never claim that would be the case. But it's to get it started, to start the conversation, to have something concrete in our council deliberations, because it wasn't just nice to hear nice fluffy words about social justice. It's actually to get on and do something about it. We can all do nice warm words, but doing something is much harder. And then it was further prompted by a social justice advisory committee meeting where a paper was presented that alluded to defining poverty. Then after an hour conversation, I spoke on it, and the paper didn't even define poverty. So I just felt exasperated by that and where we were going and the lack of coherence. So I did something about it. The paper talks about threshold incomes, it talks about social capital, it talks about a potential structure. It is not saying the structure cannot be improved, changed, amended, but it's about putting something on the table that we can actually debate in substantive terms. I think what was the biggest thing about the paper, which I only discovered myself doing the work, crunching the numbers on the ONS website as best I could, was about income inequality in the county. And that is the substance of this motion, Chair, that income inequality and poverty is an issue in Monmouthshire. And it's often skated across and by Welsh Government. I mean, I've read this in detail. Again, I maybe have too much time on my hands. But that is all about the concentration of poverty. And then marking up wards across Wales about their levels of concentration. And that will always miss Monmouthshire. Always. It will never, ever cover Monmouthshire because we haven't got concentrated levels of poverty like the extent of Blinders and so forth. And I'm not just picking on Blinder. There's, you know, big pockets of poverty everywhere. But Monmouthshire's poverty is more hidden. It's smaller pockets, I would say starker levels of deprivation. And the reason why that is, and there's lots of academic research to support this, is that where people who have less means or in areas which have generally greater wealth suffer disproportionately because they see the communities around them are doing far better than they are. And there's reams and reams of books, and I could bore you to death if you want me to, but I won't, about this. And the social consequences of this are vast. And if you don't have to take my word for it, in this report, I cite the OECD about this, and I'll quickly fling to that page, because I thought we were going to go discuss the other motion first, was multi-dimensional natures of inequality, socioeconomic status heavily influences employment prospects, job quality, health outcomes, education, and other opportunities, including social capital. So this is OECD, not the Socialist Marxist Revolution organisation, about, you know, this kind of social justice lovey, lefty lovey group. They noticed there was a huge impact on socioeconomic status, on people's quality of life, and the ability to move on in life. And so we need to address it. And so I looked at this, and Monmouthshire is the second highest in Wales, behind Denbighshire. Third is the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, the statistics around this can be improved, and I say that in my paper, but the statistics we do have, that is the indication you get. And it's all ONS data, it's not my own data, I haven't made it up. And to give you a feel for the social consequences, I show a table about the achievement of pupils on free school meals at GCSE level last year, and we were the worst performing authority in Wales. And the gap in attainment between the pupils on less means compared to the better off peers was the highest again for the 5 years in a row in Monmouthshire. So there's real social conscience to the level of income inequality we have. Now, we have financial constraints in this council. I like to think we all agree on that, and we like to look for sensible, prudent solutions forward. And my solution here is, why don't we ask the Welsh Government for an income inequality grant that takes account of the vast levels of inequality in Wales, but in particularly Monmouthshire. This grant will be above the RSG. So it's additional money, not taken away from the RSG settlement we already have. And it'll be targeted to those communities with the highest levels of deprivation in our county. It's a suggestion. It's a way forward for means that we can tackle the stark inequalities in our county. And if people still doubt me about income equality differences in this county, from Crossonnin to St Kingsmark, the average family in St Kingsmark will earn £20,000 more on average in 1 year. In the same town of Chepstow, my ward and Councillor Watts' ward, a family will earn less than families in St Kingsmark, £17,000. That's in the same town, quarter of a mile away. There's real consequences to that division, Chair, and Monmouthshire is one of the worst. And I'm not apportioning blame in this document. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not talking about the Welsh Government, this, the UK Government, that. I've sought to avoid that at all costs. So I thought, well, I can give it, I can scrutinise, I talk about it, I put motions down, we hear warm words, or I could do something about it. So I did something about it, and I propose a solution forward, and I hope the council supports me in that.
Do you have a seconder for the motion? For the Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. I think that those of you who have read the report and recommendations that the leader of the Labour group has put forward here will share with me the view that we are extremely fortunate as a council to have a social scientist among our members who is able to do the sort of analysis that Dimitri's report shows. I think it's very easy, and it's said very often in this chamber, why don't you suggest an alternative? Well, I think here we've got an example of a document that is thoughtful, well-reasoned, and academic in its analysis, actually pointing to ways in which we can, as a council, seek to address those very real pockets of poverty that do exist in our county. And of course, I represent one of those pockets. And I remember being in the Abergavenny community enterprise, which this council supports. It's in the heart of my ward. And one day in the summer, they'd organised a day trip for kids, free. And a little boy was getting on, and he said to the administrator of the centre, "Oh, thank you for giving me a summer holiday this year." And that was a one-day trip to the seaside. It's when we regard that as the norm in far too many people's lives in this county, but I accept it's a very small minority. What the suggestions contained in this document will enable this county to do is to directly address those areas of need to try to overcome the worst of poverty, because the reality is we will never have equality of opportunity for the children in those families while their parents are struggling with poverty. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll jump straight in if that's okay. I'm going to propose an amendment, and it's a very minor amendment, so I hope it's one that everyone here can support. The amendment would be that this council, rather than the Labour group, believes that inequality and poverty are major problems in Monmouthshire, and that the council should campaign for an income inequality grant. So a very minor change that I wish to bring forward to the originally proposed motion.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Peakins.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, talk to the amendment and to talk about my approach to what I wanted to say today, because what I want to do, and we've had this issue come forward for the last 3 council meetings, and I absolutely understand and appreciate the scale of the problem and acknowledge the challenge that we face. But what I want to do today is to outline what we are committing to already, because I just want to be absolutely clear to everyone in this room, to our residents, to anyone that's choosing to look into officers, that this council is totally and utterly committed to tackling poverty and the challenges that inequality presents within our communities. And whilst there's a multitude of activity that's going on, I won't say that that's everything that needs to happen. Clearly, there's more that does need to happen. And I won't list all of that work. But what I do want to say is that I'm proud to be part of a Team Monmouthshire, that's working to address these issues and that puts challenging inequality at the core of its business, whatever department you work in. So that's the first element I want to address. And secondly, I want to talk about the way forward, because I think that's what's key. That's what needs to come out of today, is a positive way forward, supporting the amended motion, and not necessarily looking in detail at the paper that Dimitri has brought forward. And it's a paper that I welcome. I really welcome the effort, the time that you've put into this. And whilst it's not part of the stated motion, I'm keen just to briefly reflect on that and say how we can take that forward as part of our considerations. But I do want to say, and it's a paper that's very strong on governance, we have to be very strong on governance in terms of the way that papers are presented to us. It has to go through the right scrutiny function. So bringing myself to the first point that I was talking about in terms of where we stand on our commitment to addressing poverty, what are we currently doing? What's the policy position of this council? Because I want us all to be very clear. In May 2018, we were the first council in Wales to adopt a social justice strategy. It's a strategy that has since been revised, and it will continue to be revised on an annual basis, reflecting the need to ensure that we make changes and make it a live document. Now, that strategy received a strong endorsement. The Public Service Board itself adopted the principles from within the strategy. In addition to that strategy, we have a corporate plan that puts tackling and delivering on social justice, better prosperity, reducing inequality as one of its core themes. Within that corporate strategy is one of the aims, which is to reduce child poverty and social isolation and to improve economic inclusion. Now, I absolutely agree that we do actually need to do more around definitions, around measurements. Councillor Petrini makes a good point around that. And actually, we repurposed the FEDIC group, which is the main platform for looking at these issues. It's now called the PSB Tackling Poverty Group, and it will now look at determining, with expediency, the most appropriate outcomes and measurements and definitions. I want to turn to governance. Where do we stand in terms of addressing these issues in terms of governance? There are effectively two parallel but very much connected governance structures within the strategic vision that we have for monitoring the effectiveness and the aspirations of both our council and the PSB respectively. These agendas are very closely connected, and I'm very happy to look again at governance as part of this review and also some of the information that Councillor Petrini's presented. And then on to the absolute key point in terms of where we sit, where we stand and where we're looking to achieve. It's on delivery. What have we set ourselves as a council? Well, the social justice strategy explicitly recognises the need to work collaboratively with partners to tackle poverty. And we developed a number of objectives which are all listed within that strategy, which we're working towards and we're delivering on. And that's often supported by the very strong community partnership development team that we have in place in this council. Now, one of those key objectives, and Councillor Petrini has alluded to that, is to actually create a tackling poverty plan. And we're very clear in the social justice strategy that that plan is to be developed in partnership. It's not to be a council-owned plan. I don't think it will have the success unless it's worked out in partnership. And what I did, or what council officers and myself did, was then to create a workshop which brought forward third sector partners, all people involved in this agenda, to look at the sort of information that needed to go into that action plan. And I know that every single person in this room was invited to those workshops. And indeed, I know, Peter, you came along, Penny came along. We were all inputting into that. And out of that came a Tackling Poverty Action Plan. Members, it does exist, it is in existence. It might not be what Councillor Petrini wants to see, it might not be the finished product, but it's there and it's a live document, and it's one we're going to continue to work to. I said I wouldn't list successes, but I've got to just highlight some of the excellent work that is going on that shows that we're really active within the council and within our communities. Inspired to Work, Inspired to Achieve, Communities for Work, Communities Skills at Work, the Compass Project, the Shift Project, our play schemes, the SHEP programmes. All of these programmes are absolutely critical to the delivery of trying to tackle issues around inequality. Now, Councillor Petrini, you talk about getting on and doing something. I don't think you can fail that we're not getting on and doing things as a council. There are so many good examples of where that's happening within our communities. We can do more, of course we can. This issue is never going to be resolved overnight, but we're certainly strong in delivery. Now, just coming on to the second part of my motion, I just want to reflect on going forward, because I want out of today to be a positive. Let's look at how we can work collaboratively. And, I very much, as I said, I welcome the plan that you've put forward, the strategy that you've looked at, Councillor Petrini. I'd call it a strategy rather than a plan, if I may. It broadly aligns already with the work that we're already doing as an administration, as the work of the officers. It's things that we are already taking part in. In fact, as the plan suggests, I've already mentioned earlier that officers and members are now repurposing the FEDIC group, and the PSB Programme Board have recently agreed to change the name of that group to the Tackling Poverty Action Group and to review the terms of reference of that group. We also recognise the need to review the current Tackling Poverty Action Plan. I will reiterate again, there is a plan, and we will work with you, if you're happy for us to do so, in revising a version of that plan, potentially taking some elements forward of the strategy which you propose. already happening, this was already in existence, it's in Strong Communities work plan, is that poverty plan is being presented to Strong Communities on the 23rd of April. The committee, and I'm sure open to everyone in this room, will have the opportunity to scrutinise that plan. And as with any report, we'll have recommendations that come back to me as Cabinet member and which I will consider and reflect upon. And fundamentally, that will form part of my annual social justice strategy review. That happens on an annual basis, and it will be a very meaningful piece of work to help me in that agenda. Just briefly on income inequality, because obviously that's a core part of the motion, I'm really keen to explore this further. I certainly wouldn't disagree with the strategy document that you put forward, which provides evidence over the impact of income inequality. Yes, of course, we understand that that's a real challenge and very much in existence within our communities. Some of the research you've done is very good in relation to this, and I'd be happy to examine that further in terms of how we present that to Welsh Government, because I believe anything that brings the lowest funded authority in Wales more money is of course to be welcome. But we do need to be cognizant of the fact that it shouldn't just be about direct funding. Actually, it's about the delivery, the projects, the things that are happening on the ground in addition to the fund as well. And I'll wrap up shortly, but I just want to highlight
one minute, Councillor Jones.
Sorry? One slight creaking concern is that we're talking a bit of an echo chamber here, a bit of a bubble. We're talking about strategies, we're talking about plans. We should be talking about co-production. We should be talking about co-design. We should be talking about bottom-up, community-led development, working with our community and partnership development team to make that happen. So, in summary, as Cabinet Member Social Justice, I welcome the work that's been undertaken from both our officers and also the document you produced, Councillor Bertulli. This is a serious issue affecting a lot of our residents. We are tackling it already, but we need to do more, and I appreciate that. Finally, a very last comment. When I first became Cabinet Member, I sent an email to every person in this room offering to go out to visit your wards, to understand, to get under the skin, to decide and look at the challenges that you have in your communities. An email will be going out again to do that, and I would very much encourage you to take me up on that offer, because I want to listen to your communities, I want to listen to your residents, and it's through that I will get further ahead in developing our approach to tackling poverty and reducing inequality in our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Watts.
I mean, these are all fine words by Sarah, and I hear what she says, and she talks the MCC speak, but the reality is, since, you know, I've been here, how long have I been on the authority now? 13, 14 years, I think. It's always been Conservative. And in that time, consistently, every time there's an election, if you go out in my ward, it gets worse. People are worse off. They're struggling to feed their children. They're struggling to find work, appropriate work. Any long-term kind of work, and yet at the same time in my ward, for example, there's been a disinvestment in the overall community. When the school burnt down, it should have rebuilt, we should have had a 21st century school. It wasn't a 21st century school. So they've been shortchanged. And I really admire the fact that Dimitri's simply had enough of you saying, look, Welsh Government, they're not giving us enough money, and you say the same thing every year, every year since I've been on this authority. And then we have a very pragmatic approach from Dimitri. Right, we're going to do a report where we can evidence that we do need additional funding, and he's done that. So I'm grateful that at least you've had to take it on, but you had no other choice. You'd have just looked meaner than you ever were if you didn't. So I'm going to park it up there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the analysis and the time that Councillor Bertulli has put into this paper. He's clearly invested a lot of work in developing his thinking about what could work. And I think that's to be welcomed. And I think that Sarah's point about the fact that there is a willingness to look at social justice already, and there are some matters in progress, is also positive, and the key is absolutely about working together. But I think it's really timely with in Wales we will be enacting the socio-economic duty come April, which means that when we make any decisions we will absolutely have to consider socio-economic factors as well as the other protected characteristics under the Equalities Act. So I note that when we're considering our budget shortly, there are a number of factors in there which point to a potential for a cumulative impact on households where they experience disproportionate disadvantage because of their protected characteristics. And I hope that these, so our, you know, the willingness to think about poverty and social exclusion will extend to some real discussions about what does that actually mean? What does the increase in school meals mean? What does disinvesting from the top-up and the discretionary payments for business rates on our high streets mean in terms of, you know, people's livelihoods and incomes? What do those things really mean? Because that's as much about, you know, our impact as having a you know, a piece of work which does some really good things with a few people. But I've talked to Dimitri already about this. I'm always concerned about the prospect of programmes. I don't in any way say that additional funding is not helpful sometimes. But if we genuinely want to attack this issue, because it affects, you know, it makes everybody poorer. Inequality makes us all the poorer for it. We will have to lobby very hard, for example, Welsh Government, who don't at this point in time feel that there's a need for a specific poverty strategy. And equally, the UK government. Let's not forget the UK government are not enacting the social economic duty under the Public Sector Equality Act. So there is a lot of work to do if we genuinely want to make changes, you know. And I think that if we do that with our eyes open and really think, as Sarah says, about delivery as opposed to just strategy, we can make some differences. But the differences we can make in Monmouthshire on its own are limited. And I think we have to understand that and do that with, you know, being really cited about what that means. We can do things which impact on people's personal and social circumstances. We absolutely can. But the wider structural things, our systems, education systems, benefit systems, I think we have to be realistic about what we can do about that and whether we're prepared to use our position and our power, personal or corporate, to do something about that. Thank you.
Councillor Petruni.
And I looked at the timeline. So there was a consultation, and I saw a consultation in 2018. Early 2019, I asked the officers directly by phone call and email, what was the outcome of this, where's the plan uses. Before I put the motion in September, I asked if there was a plan, double checking myself. If there's a plan, great, then I can pull the motion, I don't have to do a speech. No, Councillor, there is no plan. So the officers were lying to me, according to Councillor Jones, which is nice to hear. But then the plan she did send me, first time I've seen it, apparently I haven't seen it before, I haven't, because I wouldn't have wasted 3 months of my life doing this if I had. I looked at the Microsoft Word document when it was created. It was created on the 15th of October 2019. On the 9th of October 2019, there was a Twitter spat between me and Councillor Jones. So 6 days later, they created a document to create this action plan. So it did not exist until there was an argument about it existing. And that's not me looking at the Word document says when it was created, who the author was, when it was updated. That's all independent information, nothing to do with me. So it was created 6 days after we had a public row about it. But I'm glad you did something about it. I'm glad there is a plan. It seems to be
Councillor Petruni, we have a point of order.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to provide evidence to members after to show that that was not what instigated the plan. It was already in existence prior to this Twitter spat. But I just want to ensure and reassure members that it was not born out of a Twitter conversation with Councillor Petruni.
Thank you.
Well, they created a document 6 days later after.
Conversation, but the assertion made is an incredibly strong one. Consequently, that we'll see an inaction of a process beyond this council all I would ask for the continuation of the conversation is you just be mindful of your language within the whole chamber, because I will be enacting a process around this.
Thank you, Chief Executive. What I can say for sure is that this Microsoft Word document that was sent to me was created on the 15th. That's what the document says, of October, and who the author was, which I won't say, given the Chief Executive's words. But we are where we are, and I do appreciate we wanting to go forward. Councillor Jones mentions this a couple of times, that there is good work happening, and she mentions it in the Social Justice Advisory Group, and I've never disagreed with that. I don't think anyone's ever said there are not good things happening. And I've said in that meeting, and I've said it to anyone who's willing to ask, is how do I know they are being effective? People tell me they're being effective, but as the opposition leader, I need to scrutinise that and check if it is being effective. And it seems to be happening on kind of disparate lines. It doesn't seem to be a coherent narrative about, are they thinking together, are they talking together? They might be, but it's not clear to me that they are. So I put in this thing a structural suggestion, Now, you could dismiss it all you like, but that was where I was coming from on the structural suggestions. And I was in the public chamber when I offered to go to Swansea Council, because they were leading the way on this in Wales. Councillor Fox spoke, and I appreciate Councillor Jones had to leave the meeting for personal reasons. But I went to Swansea Council, and I spoke to actually the officer there, who was really impressive, about what they were doing. So I based my structural plan basically on their model, what was working, what kind of worked. So it's all about speaking to other people, other councils on a cross-collaboration basis, learning from what's happening. And talking on your point around getting everyone involved, and that's why I support this council on the amendment, is that Swansea did a thing where they empowered Conservative, as a Labour-controlled council, empowered Conservative councillors to deliver certain action points of their plan. So I'm very happy to support this council on the amendment, because where it does seem to work in Wales and actually elsewhere, in Leeds and in Scotland, it's done on a cross-party basis. That is how it works. That is when everyone buys in. So happy to support this council and to move positively on this agenda and to actually see deliverables.
Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I've got a copy of the report or the paper that Dimitri provided, and I support the amendment on the way forward. But I look at the analysis that's been provided for us, and 4 wards, the highest 4 wards in Monmouthshire are in Caldecott, 7 ward, West End ward, my ward, and Green Lane ward. So we are, I hope, trying to give some drive within Caldecott on the regeneration, which might bring some, and of course the leisure centre, which I support, bring forward some social justice for the people in Caldecott and the youngsters. And when I came to this council in 2008, my ward's Deuce Ward, and the first thing I saw, I knew it was there before, but the first thing I saw was the abject poverty in Oakley Way. Abject poverty, and it was children who couldn't go to school, children who had health problems, and it was quite rampant. And at that time, I think Councillor Davis might have been involved around that time in terms of a former project board where we met the Redden Health Board, etc., and MHA, and after a lot of persuasion, MHA took forward a project that spent about £12 million in that area. Now, people have got some aspirations possibly once these properties are refurbished and rebuilt. But whilst that is going on, there is still poverty behind the doors. And I know of children, maybe 1 or 2, not lots of them, but children who go to school hungry, who go to school tired, who, on the basis of being hungry and tired, they're not quite much attention to their learning as they ought to do. So they're the issues we need to look at, is the poverty which happens behind doors. I know that teachers in schools are feeding some of these children just to keep them nourished in the morning. So poverty, visible poverty, could be removed in terms of making sure that the living standards are raised, but the poverty that is behind doors has got to be somehow got to be trying to remove that and give the parents, a lot of single parents, a lot of young families, the aspirations to be able to earn more in the locality. As reports shows, the average earnings maybe for a couple in Caldecott, maybe 18,000. It's not £690 a week, which may be in some of the more affluent areas, and I accept there's the poverty within the affluent areas as well. So I support the amendment. I support the Councillor Jones has said, and I think we should drive forward and try and find out how to reduce the high levels. 30%, 31% is high. Quite a lot in Monmouthshire, 28. Most of them in Abergavenny, Chepstow, even Usk is fairly high, and Caldicot and Monmouth. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just point out at this stage that we are not actually debating the report and the information in it. It is supplementary evidence, which we do appreciate having, but we are debating the motions. Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Dimitri, nobody's attacking your report. In fact, I think the messages that were heard from Sarah is very much welcome, and we thank you for doing that extra work. We're not here, as just been pointed out, to debate that, but very clearly, as Sarah said, you know, your information will go forward and through the right governance channels to be able to feed into the wider discussions. I thank Sarah for highlighting and outlining what has been done on this agenda, but also recognising there's far more to do. And I think with these, with the conversation that will go forward, we will build on that work. I know it may be disappointing sometimes that we are not disagreeing with you, and you've gone into this sort of negative challenge mode. Sometimes you need to sit back and listen to what you're saying, because we're not against you on this one. We're actually wanting to work with you, and you're trying to rubbish us for wanting to do that. Sarah has said very clearly and very eloquently how she wants to work together on this agenda. So I'm not going to raise too much to that debate, but I will remind, well, Armand, you were here in, several years ago. I was here 22 years ago when this was Labour-dominated, this council. In 1997, not an inkling on this agenda was ever on the agenda through those many years ago. There was nothing on this agenda. And indeed, Monmouthshire was the first authority in Wales to actually take this so seriously that they create a portfolio specifically to take it forward. Wales government still have not got a minister with specific, or rather that's their role to take forward social justice in its widest context. They haven't got one. So you know, let's not preach at us. We're not perfect. We've got some big steps to move forward on, but we've done some brilliant work to date. So let's not get into a political debate about this. We don't need to. We're actually in support of this. It's about how we bring these things forward. So you've developed a piece of work, which is great. It has to go through a process to get it into, and some of the content of it into our deeper thinking and our wider strategy. And that can happen. So nobody's rubbishing the work you've done. I thank you for recognising that for us to adopt this as a council, we needed to change that first couple of words to the council. We're not moving away from any element of the motion at all. We're supportive of that. We're not sure how the Wales Government would look on the implementation of an income equality grant. I'm happy also to make the case for that, to see if there is scope for that in the likes of Monmouthshire. Sadly, at the moment, we don't see, our voice doesn't seem to have much impact when we talk about the pressures and the demographic pressures and the changes and challenges we have. It's not always listened to, but hopefully, perhaps in the future, with a concerted and a unified way forward, perhaps they might start listening to it. So it's a good initiative. Let's see if we can get some traction on it. So, Madam Chairman, I don't think there's any disagreement, and this amended motion is very, very similar to the actual motion, and I'm happy to support the motion in its amended state, and hopefully that will go forward as a substantive motion which we can all agree to.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that we definitely support the amendment, and it is wonderful that we could work cross-party to actually try and really understand and get to the bottom of where the problems of poverty actually are in Monmouthshire. I really want to commend Councillor Petruni for the amount of work he put in on the reports. I realise we are not debating that now, but it's provided a huge amount of really interesting information, which I was found fascinating, especially the point at which we started to look at the high cost of housing and then the impact that can have on the disposable incomes of families and how that can actually have a big knock-on effect. So it really has some valuable information in there, which would be really useful to look at in more depth in a committee structure and try and find ways that we can move forwards. Personally, I end up hearing from schools mostly about how poverty affects children, how children from not just the free school meals pupils, in many respects schools say they are actually reasonably well catered for because they are targeted in the school system. It's actually the parents who are having to work the 2 jobs, who are having to work those extra hours just in order to make those horribly high rental costs. Because by gum, now even in Caldecott, the cost of buying a house or renting a house is extremely high. And so that is having a big impact on our residents. And more people are suffering and more people are really struggling to make ends meet. And talking to teachers, talking to head teachers, they're saying they're really seeing the effects of it as children enter the school system. And they haven't had that same level of input there in those early years. And that's one of the areas which I think we'll end up seeing the repercussions of that for many, many years to come if we don't start addressing it very, very soon. So I really commend the motion, the amended motion. I really would love us to be able to work cross-party and to really find dynamic ways forwards to actually try and tackle, understand and tackle poverty in Monmouthshire. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. One of my big bugbears in the whole thing, and following on from Peter's sort of pitch for the next United Nations peace envoy, I think one of the issues for me with poverty, Councillor Watkins sort of snipped in front of me a little bit, is the cost of housing. The cost of housing in the private sector is huge. Many people are paying sort of 50+% of their annual income, monthly income, on housing costs in rent alone. And I think we've sort of missed the point a little bit. Dimitri's report, as excellent as it was, didn't take into account the cost of housing in one of those tables. He said the actual cost of housing on top of this makes it even worse. And I just wonder what we are doing as an authority to try and alleviate it. When all the social housing was sold off and it was never really replaced, that was probably for me one of the worst things that the last 20 years has contributed to. We're sort of playing, trying to catch a trout with a digestive biscuit at the moment to get people a house. You may get one, but you'll be lucky if you find 2. Years ago, I was given the keys to 3 and said, go and pick which one you wanted. I mean, those days are long gone. And I think there's a national housing crisis in the United Kingdom, in Wales, and in every local authority that I speak to people in. And I think maybe we should also take some sort of a slant on what we can do. I think we discussed some time ago about setting up our own housing company and doing this on a model I think they did in Bristol, but it seems to have died a death now. You know, we seem to be able to buy a retail park in Newport, but we've lost the actual thing of what it's going to do physically for the people in our area. I mean, Phil's gone whoosh in there, like he nearly took the side of my head off with his hand up, but I think that...
Chair, as a point of order, we did not buy a retail park in Newport. We bought a leisure park in Newport. It's an entirely different thing.
Okay, I'll rephrase that. We managed to buy a leisure park in Newport, which I understand, and I'm not knocking the decision. But what I'm saying is, we were originally going to look to develop some sort of housing structure within the county, and I think maybe it's time to just have another little look at it.
Councillor Dimmock.
Yes, just quickly, Chair. I support, obviously, Zara's amendment. I look forward to when this work comes to Strong Communities on the 23rd of April. I hope to see lots of people also attend, other members. The door is always welcome. Dimitri, you indicated that you wanted to join Strong Communities. I hope you are still going to do that. And we could work together, and what a formidable piece of work it could be. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as somebody who, I think by today's standards, was brought up in poverty, I'm delighted that we are all talking together about this issue. I support the amendment, obviously. Dimitri has worked very hard on this document that he's produced, But let's be honest about it. If you were a person who's living in poverty, you couldn't care less whether it's a Labour idea, a Conservative idea, or whoever's idea it is. It's about results at the end of the day. Now, I'm somebody who have a personal aversion to talking shops. I do realise that we have to talk for a long time, but at the end of the day, we've got to get on with it and do it. And in order to do that, we've got to have a system for setting ourselves targets and milestones and monitoring. And there's nothing wrong with that, because even if we're not quite making those targets, we can make amendments to the plan or whatever. Now, something that I feel is lacking within the authority is that ability and the systems of putting in what are our targets, what are we aiming to achieve. I understand we can't do everything in Monmouthshire, but we have some very good initiatives going on with regard to the economic emotions and the things that are going on, the independent company for developing, and that sort of. All of these things have an input into poverty. If we can create more jobs, then we can perhaps close that income gap. So they are all related. What we need is a coordinated policy, a coordinated system of review and monitoring, so that we can actually say, yes, this is where we aim to be. We're not quite there yet, but we can move further. Talking about it has never solved anything, in my opinion, right? Especially when it comes to business. At some stage, you need to get on and do something about it. And I hate talking shops. I hate people who spend hours and hours just talking about something and not actually doing something. Yeah. We have an opportunity here to work together to tackle this, and that working together is also, as Paul would tell you, we work together on economy and development. We support different things, even though we come from different backgrounds. What we all want is things to get better for people in Monmouthshire. So let's do it properly. Let's actually have a system that we can monitor and review, and that everybody, when they put on their computers, can say, well, that's what we intended to do. That was our target. Are we doing that? Are we not doing it? Is there something else we can do? Because I find the information systems on this council are very poor. As an ex-manager, they wouldn't be good enough for me. So I think we need to think about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Murphy, did you wish to speak, or was it the point of order you were raising earlier?
I said what I was going to say, Chair.
Councillor Jones, would you like to write a reply or sum up?
We haven't agreed the amendment yet.
No, this is the amendment. I'm sorry. I meant, did you wish to come back on any of the raised questions? Right, thank you. We will, therefore, we'll go to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous, so it now becomes a substantive motion. So can we all vote on that one, please?
There's room for conversation on that.
On? Councillor Bertuni.
Just to say, glad we're moving forward to answer some of the technical questions. Alan, there are targets. You'll be pleased to know that are measurable and we can work towards. There's also actions, speaking to Kevin's point about housing. Housing is the biggest driver of child poverty in Monmouthshire, without doubt. It's the biggest driver of poverty amongst women, single women, particularly with children, as the paper evidences, and they will be most likely grouped to be in the bottom 10th percentile of income earners. So that there's a big scope of work about the demographic. It's because it's particular demographics that are affected, and it's about housing. And part of that housing, and I put a housing motion, I don't know, it was a couple of years ago now, about developing our housing company. So far, nothing. And on that, it's to bring that forward, because housing, without the housing piece of the puzzle, you will solve none of this.
Right, we will now go to vote on this substantive. This becomes a substantive motion. We will now vote on that. All those in favour? And we are unanimous once again. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the next motion, again from Councillor Bertuni.
Thank you. Where I started maybe about 45 minutes ago, mistakenly, is about Mountain House and going forward the land that Mountain House is within, and the future strategy for children with SEBD conditions. The decision has now been made to go forward with a consultation to close Mountain House. I'm sure Councillor John will correct me if I'm wrong on that, which was earlier this month. I'm on record, I think the whole Labour group pretty much is on record of being opposed to that, but that decision has been made. And it was heartbreaking to read some of the consultation responses from parents about that decision, or imminent decision, or planned decision. And particularly one parent who wrote in, since my son has gone to Mountain House, he's done really, really well. He cannot be placed back into mainstream. It has brackets, parent becomes very upset. Said she was very worried about her family being ripped apart. Said her son has made positive relationships with the staff and the school. Her son, I'm not going to say his name, but it's all public domain, states if you just want to see him, what the school has done for him, he was suicidal.
Councillor Petroni,
before he went
this is
to,
not...
it's about Mountain House.
This is
Mountain House.
We're talking about your motion, please.
Yeah, and my
the
motion
future of
says
Mountain House
decision
has
to close
already been debated.
Yeah, and it says decided to close Mountain House within the wording, Chair. Have you read, the motion?
Yes, but we are not reopening the debate into the closure of Mountain
so I can't
House.
I can't talk about subjects within my motion.
You can refer to things, but we are not reopening the debate, just to make that clear.
I can't read out this parent's comments about the decision to close Mountain House. Just to be clear.
The chair has just sought advice. The motion has got two parts. The first part is about ongoing use of the land, the site. The second part is future provision for SEBD children. They're the two aspects of the motion. That's what you should be speaking to.
So I'm not allowed to talk about that. Okay, those parents' views don't matter. Moving to the land about Mountain House. Councillor John said to me, or said to the Cabinet, I believe, last week, there was no truth in the rumours, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, no truth to the rumour that land could be sold for housing. I think those are exact words, or give or take. That was Councillor John's clear, concise words. And I, to be honest, don't trust you on that. And I'll explain my reasons why, rationally based reasons why that is the case. We can't take the administration's word for it, because I've got a press release here, 2018, promising a new Mountain House school, highlighted. I've got a Young People Select Committee held on the 17th of May 2018, where the Chief Officer and the Cabinet member reassure all members present, welcome the reassurance that their education would continue at Mountain House. Pupils excited, which they've backtracked on, because this was a proposal, and it's all there in black and white, this proposal to revamp Mountain House to accommodate 3 to 19-year-olds, to accommodate girls, to accommodate the extra conditions I think Councillor John just talked about, because it doesn't accommodate children on the autistic spectrum, and particularly girls, which is not right, completely agree. But you planned to do this for Mountain House. It's all there in black and white. Your own words, your own Chief Officer's words. And now it's closed. Now you're closing it. So you promised to do it, you backtracked, you didn't do it. Councillor John, in a budget meeting last year, when I said, there might be, I think the Cabinet have considered plans to increase charges on free school breakfast from £1 to £2, basically said I shouldn't believe everything I've heard. And then the paper after, their own paper, said that they had considered that. And then Councillor John in Cabinet last week said in his statement, it's all on YouTube and I've rewatched it, said that council budgets, after being prompted by a question by myself, said that they were improving, even though the paper in front of me said not only were they not improving, they were getting considerably worse. To the extent I was confused and I had to ask the Councillor Murphy for Finance for a clarification on that. So forgive me if I don't trust you when you say no truth to the rumours. And it's nothing personal, I'm just going on the record of what's happened before and the statements you've made before. And I think going some way, accepting this motion and putting restrictions on that use of land will be a step forward in the right direction, and which basically makes sure that land can be used for educational purposes, broad as it can be, for all of the county, for local community, or that it could be used for the local community, Paul Merrick. Predominantly can use that land or how they see fit. And I think that will reassure everyone, including myself and local residents and anyone else fearful in Chepstow about more housing, that this land will not be used, maybe not now, but in the future. And the future does matter because land very close, almost adjacent to Mountain House land, has been bought by Bovis Homes. Now, housing development companies do buy speculatively, that is true, but they're no mugs, and they don't buy land unless they get the feeling that housing is possible in that area. And so it might not be planned housing this year, next year, but in 5-10 years, do you think there won't be a huge demand to use that brownfield site? Huge demand, given the housing pressures in Chepstow that we all know about and generally in the south of county. Do you seriously not believe that a future council wouldn't want and seriously look at that site for housing, considering the land just next to it had been bought by Bovis Homes? So this would be a good way of saying, no, we're absolutely with you. It's not going to be used for anything else. It should be used just for the community or wider educational purposes. And that could be determined by the Cabinet as it so wishes. I just want to make sure that land is not used for housing, because Chepstow is under huge pressure, as we all know, as the Cabinet knows, and there's work ongoing to deal with it. But we don't need more houses, particularly in that area. The second point is related to Estin's point, and I must admit this motion was submitted 3 or 4 months ago. Estin's point in relation to the consultation. And the Estin's view that there was a lack of clarity whether the proposals are at least likely to maintain the standard education provision in the area, and that they go on to say they weren't very clear about future for these children in the area. And so this is just, again, seeking clarification here from you and from the administration that there is a future plan. It's going to come forward. I asked you at Cabinet about the base funding for the funding for secondary schools. And to be fair, you said there'd be extra base funding for the secondary schools with pupil referral units. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I've misheard you. But that seems to suggest to me, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, that you plan this to be ongoing for at least the short to medium term, about pupils suffering or having these conditions and getting the necessary education they deserve, are going to be put into mainstream. And that is the future plan. You can correct me on that, and I'm happy to be proven wrong on that, because that won't be acceptable for the children presently attending that school and future children who would probably need that provision in the future. I would have liked for you to go back to your original plan that you promised in 2018, and you reassured the parents, and you reassured the pupils, and you reassured the community members that we redevelop Mountain House, but it's off the table. So let's do the next best thing and make sure that land is used for the educational purposes across the county, and particularly for the local community, and make sure there's no extra housing on that site.
Do you have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Thomas.
Thanks. I fully support the motion that has been put forward now by the Labour leader. I know that parents and students at Mountain House, staff there who are going to be made redundant now this coming August actually, if that site, and it is a very valuable site, I'd not been there until this issue arose about Mountain House, but it is in a very sought after area. If you look at the quality of housing in Porthmeiric, it is in great demand. They are going to feel incredibly let down if that land is sold for housing or for development, and their school has gone, and their children have to move to a very uncertain future. And personally, I still feel very disappointed that that school is closing. We will no longer have provision within this authority. You look at other authorities, you look at the school Maes-Ebw in Blaen y Gwent, you look at Trinity Fields in Caerphilly, they are providing an excellent facility for children with special needs. And my main concern is what is the long-term plan for these pupils with special needs.
in this authority, the number of pupils with special needs isn't going down, unless I'm reading the wrong figures. And certainly the current pupils in Mountain House are left in limbo. Staff are leaving quite rapidly, the ones that are able to get jobs. Others are facing redundancy. And it's not really, it can't be a very happy place to be. There needs to be some clarity on the future for these youngsters and for the staff, to be fair, who have worked hard there, and for children with special needs. The worst possible thing you can have for those children is uncertainty. What is going to happen in terms of the future plan? And I really make a plea now for some strong lead in terms of an assurance that that land is not going to be sold off, and secondly, that the authority puts forward a clear plan as to what's going to happen for children with special needs in the authority. Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I've got a question for Councillor Bertruni. And regardless of the issues surrounding the closure of the school, you've just told us that access to affordable housing is a key problem and cause of poverty and inequality. 10 minutes later, you tell us you don't need any more housing here in Chepstow. What about all of your constituents who will be desperate for a house? You've just written their chances off. Would you prefer a mothballed building that wasn't serving any purpose to anyone at all? Seems like it.
Councillor Watts.
Giles, to suggest that that is going to be affordable housing with a plot site. Anybody that lives there understands it's...
Point of order, Chairman. I wasn't referring to the building per se. Dimitri referred to building in this part of Chepstow. Market development brings affordable housing.
Nevertheless, we know where you're going with that, and the reality is, it's Chair, can I speak? My view is, and I think the consensus of the community, certainly I'm sure Peter would agree with this, it's potentially prime real estate. Any developer would look at that and would be salivating at the profit involved in that site. This presents, though, the long term. So if we're talking about so quickly, if I may, Chair, talk about the consultation, I still don't understand, because we come from members of the public, we are elected members, how a parent could detach themselves.
I'm sorry, Councillor Watts, I have made it quite clear earlier that
so
we are
from
not
the consultation, because
reopening
the consultation,
Councillor Watts,
I'm coming on to it. If you just let me...
Would you please let me speak?
I will.
Thank you. We are not reopening the debate into Mountain House.
Because I'm talking about the consultation process itself is flawed in as much as that it makes a Nyron Bevans Health Board's consultation look good. Yeah, I don't understand how you could detach yourself from listening to some of the evidence to come up with this, this disaster effectively. And I think the other thing that the cabinet member hasn't listened to or understood is that some of those children, by default, and social services probably won't want to talk about this, will clearly have attachment issues. They are significant in the development of those children. And there we are, sending them off to an uncertain future. Those children will be distressed, confused, and that will reflect in their behaviour. You do not get it, you do not understand it, because you don't live like them.
I'm going to ask the Chief Officer if he would like to give us some information about the future of the 6 children.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Just picking up on some of the comments with regards to the future role of the PRS in particular, because I don't think there's been clarity on that, and with regards to where the children are placed and their futures. So with regards to the role of the PRS, the funding that was alluded to at the discussion at Cabinet last week is to support our 4 secondary schools manage children who are at risk of exclusion in their mainstream setting. So it does not relate to any child at Mountain House. It's an entirely separate population of children. The children at Mountain House are being carefully supported through the ongoing annual statementing process, reviews of their statement and their educational needs, to ensure that we are able to support them and place them in appropriate provision from September onwards. There are likely to be differing solutions depending on the age of those children. So those children who are in Key Stage 3 are likely to be placed in a specialist school to support children who have SEBD as a need. Those children, of which Monmouthshire will have one child in Key Stage 4, will have a bespoke curriculum created for them and managed by the Pupil Referral Unit, and that will be met in a range of different settings and will be very akin to the provision that is in Mountain House for all Key Stage 4 pupils at the moment. I think just with regards to the provision that exists across Gwent, other local authorities do have special schools. Councillor Thomas is absolutely correct. Only one local authority has a special school for SEBD, and that is Blaenau Gwent. So Trinity Fields and Maes Ebu, which is in Newport, actually cater for children with profound and multiple learning difficulties, not SEBD. It's the school in Blaenau Gwent, which is SEBD specific. The whole purpose of the change and what we're looking to do with regards to Mountain House was to be able to provide support for children who had complex additional learning needs. Those were needs that were derived from a different origin, I guess you could say, from those which are SEBD, so those which are neurodevelopmental, and typically that does refer to the autistic spectrum disorders. So this is about us finding the right type of provision, and absolutely we committed in our paper to Cabinet in September last year that we will bring forward plans for provision in the future year. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. McLean, you said in a press release in 2018 that, I just want to see if you stick to these words, that the proposed delivery model will be similar to Newport's Maes Ebu, which you just said includes SEBD pupils. I could give these this if you want.
That's fine. I think the reference point we had going through, and I might have misstated that in 2018, was always Trinity Fields, which is a model which is based on a very singular, large-scale special school, which then does outreach to schools in and around Caerphilly. That was the model at that time. That proposal went out to proper consultation and following feedback from a range of different stakeholders about how it could be implemented, we determined that that wasn't the proposal that we wished to implement at that time. So I know, having visited Maes Ebu relatively recently, that it is not a school. It has outreach for ASD, which might have been something we were alluding to at that point in time. Okay, I hope that answers.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. With regard to the question, obviously, Paul Merrick has been talked about quite a bit this afternoon, and it's my ward. And one of the issues in general with Chepstow and also Paul Merrick is the level of traffic that's increased. And obviously, more houses means more traffic, and there's a 32% increase in traffic as a result of the tolls going. And it's not only affecting St Lawrence's Road, it's also affecting Paul Merrick as well. And obviously there are concerns in Chepstow about air quality and so forth. So this isn't the right area for housing. And I would also like reassurance that this will be used for an education or community use. As councillors know, I was very much in favour of the revamp of the school so that it would cover a wider range of needs for social needs. And when we've had reports about this, we've been told that in the future a special school will be looked at, and I would like this to be forthcoming as soon as possible because of the fact that we do have quite a lot of hidden costs that this council is paying for in terms of paying for education by either the school in Monmouth or the school in Penarth, and that's for girls who've obviously weren't catered for at Mountain House. So I'd very much like to see a new special school provision, and also not only for SEBD but also for ASD, because we did have tables to show that between the ages of 3 and 19 there are already 130 pupils who have special needs issues, and obviously there are quite a number of hidden costs. And when the original report went about revamping, it said by combining and widening a school, it would actually save 500,000 in all. So I'm very much in favour of looking at this. I appreciate that very sadly this didn't happen in relation to Mountain House School, but I think we also need to monitor what is on the short-term basis, what is actually happening to those pupils who are at that school at the moment. For example, I went along to the consultation meeting in March on closing the school, which the chief officer attended, and the chief officer did make an indication that there will be sort of pupil A and what was going to happen to them, and pupil B of what was going to happen to them. And I do think that a further report does need to go to the Children and Young People Select Committee to reassure us all what exactly is happening to these pupils, and what each particular pupil, without naming them, actually how they're being catered for and how their needs are being catered for, because obviously some of the pupils aren't this environment at the school provides for main school pupils isn't suitable for them to go into mainstream, and they need a different type of education. So I very much like reassurances about the short-term SEBD and autistic spectrum disorder future, but also the short-term and the long-term bases. And I want to know that the council are definitely putting forward proposals, as they indicated in the cabinet report previously, about looking at the provision of a new special school, because we are the only county in Gwent that doesn't have a special school, and I think this needs to be looked at seriously. Thank you.
Would you like to reply again? No. Okay. I think we'll ask the cabinet member, Richard John.
Thank you very much. I want to start by picking up on some of these quotes that Councillor Batruni started with. Firstly, about my comments in Cabinet last week about school budgets, and because of the detailed work that both Councillor Murphy, myself and senior officers have been doing with schools, we do see school budgets improving. You look at budgets going forward the next few years, they will be improving. So we absolutely stand by that. You also quoted a consultation we ran on changing the designation of Mountain House School. That was a consultation. We didn't promise that would go ahead. We listened to the views expressed in that consultation, and the views of our head teachers were very clear that they were not in support of those proposals. It was also very obvious that costs were prohibitive. You can't just spend money willy-nilly if the evidence isn't there to back it up. That's why you do the consultation, and then you're able to make an informed decision. I have a number of problems with the motion that the Leader of the Opposition has put forward. Firstly, he criticises us for not having a plan for the future of the site. When we were making the decision, and I'm not going to reopen those arguments as to whether the decision was right or wrong, the decision was taken, and no member has put in an application for a call-in to challenge that decision. We were very clear throughout this process that the decision was made on the basis of the best interests of children with additional learning needs in Monmouthshire. At no point did any of the consultation documents, events or discussions include the notion of disposal of that land for housing. I can categorically confirm, again, that no consideration has been given to selling that land for housing. Indeed, had we made that decision on the basis that we want that bit of land for X, Y or Z, we would have completely prejudiced our own consultation, our own decision-making process.
Just to be clear on your point, we're not saying the consultation was based on that decision. We're saying for future use of that site. On the motion, in the motion, that was the wording. It's not about your consultation.
We have not given any consideration to future use of that site. The decision process about closing Mountain House or not was not made on the basis of what we could use the site for in the future.
I appreciate
fine,
that.
Go ahead
I
and
am saying-
criticise us for not making,
not
having plans for the future of the
Point
site.
of
But
clarification.
that's not our priority. Our priority is
Point
what's
of
best for the
clarification,
children.
Chair, if I may. He didn't listen to what I was saying. He keeps saying that we're saying in the motion that that was part of the consideration of the consultation. Actually, it's not. The motion is saying that that's future site, now it's closed or closing, that won't be used. So we're not saying in the motion that that was part of his consideration.
Your motion says you're disappointed that we decided to close Mountain House, especially without any future plan for the site. The future use of the site is not my primary concern. My primary concern is the well-being of the children in Monmouthshire with additional learning needs. That was the basis on which we made the decision about Mountain House. The question about what the site is used for in the future, we will take advice from property services. It will be for them to look at the site. There has been no discussion about using that for housing. So I've been very clear. We would have completely compromised our own decision-making process if, at the same time, we had been thinking about what that site could be used for. That was not our motivation. Your motion calls for us to put restrictions on the site and restrict its use to educational community use. And again, the decision-making process ended yesterday. We made the decision last Wednesday. There was a 5-day call-in period. It was not called in. I think it's a bit premature to now start asking us what the site's going to be used for. We make the decision, and future use of the site, as I say, has not been my primary concern. It is not my primary concern. And I do not support binding the hands of either this administration or, as your motion attempts to do, to bind the hands of future administrations. It's for future councillors to take whatever steps they believe are necessary to deliver the best possible benefits for the people they represent. Your second point refers to future provision, and we've already committed to new provision. You'll recall the cabinet meeting we had on the 18th of September, where the report we had was very clear that we recognise there is a need in the county for provision for pupils with complex learning needs. But I'm not prepared today to be bound about where that future provision should be located. So in the report we considered on the 18th of September, we said very clearly, we will develop provision in Monmouthshire to offer education to children and young people aged 7 to 19, so that would be boys and girls, who have difficulty in learning because of a range of significant and complex additional needs. These would include children and young people with neurodevelopmental conditions, such as autistic spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and social, emotional, and mental health difficulties. And that includes children affected by adverse childhood experiences. So we were very clear. We recognise the need for future provision. But our long-term provision needs to consider the needs of all children, not just boys who are aged between 11 and 16 and have social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, of which there are few. It is not our biggest group of additional learning needs pupils, and it is not our fastest growing group either. We are looking at having 4 pupils left at 4 Monmouthshire pupils left at Mountain House at the end of this academic year, and we're working very closely with their families to establish the most appropriate provision for those pupils. So there is a clear plan to take this provision forward. And in the same report, in point 3.29, we also identified parts of the Mountain House site for future provision for children away from mainstream school for our pupil referral service. And to pick up on the point you made earlier, we have again made very clear that none of the pupils in Mountain House will be placed in mainstream schools. We've been really clear and consistent about that. But, you know, it's really frustrating that you bring this motion to the theatre of full council, and we get these crocodile tears about the decision that was taken.
Councillor John, could you finish off, please?
Sorry?
10 minutes is...
Can I just finish this last point? Yeah. You had multiple opportunities to engage in that consultation, to try to influence the decision if you disagreed with it. And yet you found time to go to the gates of Mountain House School for a photo shoot, yet none of you had time to engage in that consultation and respond to it, even though we had a request from the Leader of the Opposition to extend the period of time in which we accept consultation
Point of clarification,
responses,
I did not
so you could engage.
I did not ask for a request.
So there were multiple opportunities to influence the decision, and unfortunately you didn't take any of those up. Yet you come here and express these crocodile tears about a decision that you had every opportunity to influence, and yet you failed to do that.
Councillor Watkins.
I hope my point is going to be pretty quick. I believe Mr McLean has already assured us about point 2 that the work to check will actually be carried out. The review of SEBD provision in the county will be carried out this calendar year. So is that correct? In which case I have no questions. Thank you.
Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not going to make any dramatic gestures. I just want a point of clarity. I'm on the planning committee, and this particular property is a pretty high profile within Chepstow. What I want some guidance is, because whatever happens, I do not want to be debarred from taking my full role in planning committee as to what the future holds for this site. So am I able to vote here, or should I stay clear of it so as I retain my position to vote in planning?
Councillor Dovey, you can vote in any way you choose on this motion, be it for, against, or to abstain. Neither of those will prejudice the position you may have at a point in the future.
Councillor Fox.
Madam Chairman, I move the motion be put. I think we've had enough debate on this, and I think the Cabinet member has covered all of the points. It's a shame we've got to have this debate, and there wasn't a debate earlier. But anyway, I move the motion be put, Madam Chairman.
Do you have a seconder? We need to vote. Can we vote on that then, please, that the motion now be put?
Madam Chairman, my motion is that this council does not agree with this motion.
If I may just try and assist the chamber. Councillor Fox has moved that the motion be put. It's been seconded. That's perfectly appropriate. As I understand it, you can either vote for or against this motion because there have been no amendments moved. So, Councillor Fox, just vote against it and you achieve what you're looking to achieve. It doesn't need an amendment. You do have a right to reply, but I think... Yeah. But you do have the right to reply. And then it will go to the vote in the chamber.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. Councillor John, fair play. You said you'll stand by that school budgets will improve. I will hold you to that. Now you've said it publicly over the coming years before this term ends, but fair play, you said it. Councillor, I trust the officer, and he says that it will be a long-term plan this calendar year. So I will defer to that. But I noticed that you didn't want this council or future councils to be bound from not building or doing anything with this site, that's what disturbs me the most. We want to make sure this site is not used for housing. That is the point. It stays with the community, it stays for the educational bit, and they won't commit to it. They won't commit to it because they don't know. They might want to sell it. And they will sell it to the highest housing builder. It might not be this year, might not be next year, but they'll do it, and they don't want to bind their hands to do so. It's clear as mud. Clear as day, they'll do that, and that's why they won't back this motion.
We will now go to the vote. Okay? All those in favour of the motion? Against? Too late now.
The motion is clearly lost, Madam Chair.
Any abstentions? Abstentions? 1. Okay. So the motion is defeated. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda, members' questions from County Councillor Martin Grocott. No? Sorry, Leader.
It's been a long day, Madam Chairman. We are going through the motions. And, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's appropriate, whilst there's a lot of lobbying and work going on, that this council again reiterates its concern about the funding situation that Monmouthshire continues to face. Members would have seen various press statements and budget discussions, and would know that whilst on the face of it, it looks like local government in Wales have had a better settlement this year with an average of 4.3% increase in its budget. And that might, on the face of it, look like it's good. But what it hides is that there is a massive unfairness hidden in there, which affects us in Monmouthshire once again. You'll know that UK government passported over £600 million worth of consequentials to the Wales government for them to distribute however they wish, because it's unhypothecated monies. Welsh local government made a case that we have recognised burdens across the local government family of £254 million. Wales government in their settlement and have passed on roughly around about £188 million to address those pressures that we've identified as costing £240 million. Bear in mind they did have £600 million. But the big issue, which upsets me and I think other authorities, is that the variation in the distribution of that funding. We're seeing 5.4% increases in our neighbour just down the road in Newport, yet in Monmouthshire we're having a 3% uplift. And that doesn't go anywhere near dealing with those massive pressures that we are facing, certainly in the social care and additional learning needs area. We've got these growing pressures year on year, and we're not getting enough money to deal with it. There is something inherently wrong with the distribution of the monies that flow through to Monmouthshire and other councils. And I do sit on, or I'm invited to sit as part of the WLJ on a Wales Government funding forum where we supposedly discuss monetary issues that face local government. And there is a subgroup called a distribution subgroup, then, which is made up of officers and technical people who try to look at things like the formula. But the reality is, I make the case again and again at those funding forum meetings about the fact that the formula isn't right. And again, I'm told, Peter, you've got it wrong. You've got it wrong. You can't adjust the formula. If you adjust the formula, you'll be disadvantaged in Monmouthshire. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that actually it's appropriate now to relook at it, because councils like ours are seeing our reserves diminish, and our resources shrinking, while other areas of Wales with larger settlements see their reserves growing, stacking up. There is unparity. There is no parity. There is not a level field. And clearly the formula now isn't recognising some of those demographic pressures that we're incurring, certainly in Monmouthshire with a growing ageing population. It doesn't recognise those in the same way it recognises perhaps pupil growth and population numbers. And there is a need for a deeper look at that. And I'm hoping that in due course that my colleague leaders across Wales will recognise that and feel it right and fair that we look at this. But sadly, too often, there are people who won't do it or won't look at it. My colleague leaders of other groups in Wales won't look at it because they could lose out. So that's a debate, ongoing debate, Madam Chairman, and I call on the Council to give me support in following up that debate. But in the meantime, we really do need to lobby hard for a funding floor this year. No funding floor was put in place, and if a funding floor was put in place of, say, 4%, that would at least give some level, it would give us some relief from the pressures we are and address some of that fairness. It wouldn't cost the government much to put that floor of 4%, which would protect several authorities. It would cost probably about £3 million, but that could give us £1 million. £1 million to deliver and go towards some of those really pressurised areas we have, and may even enable us not to have to level such burdens constantly on our general public. Do you know, in Monmouthshire, the Wales Government expect, through their formula and everything, expect us to go and get 40% of all of the money we need from our taxpayers. That's not fair. That's not fair through council tax, and there is a need to review that situation. Otherwise, Monmouthshire won't be here in 10 years. We will not be sustainable unless they start looking at this whole picture. And every year we talk about this, and every year I'm not getting any traction. I'm disappointed this year. Whilst I recognise in the local government family there seems to be an increase, well, there is an increase, but it disguises the unfairness of the distribution. And Madam Chairman, I need council to stand behind me in this, and I'm sure you all do, because you know the score. Stand behind me and let's support, let's challenge again and again wherever we can. I'm looking closely already working closely with other authorities in a similar situation to bring forward meaningful options of the formula, which can at least be taken seriously in a debate, because every time I try to challenge the status quo, I'm knocked down, and that's probably because turkeys don't like voting for Christmas, and there is always winners and losers. So if there's fairness put in, it's going to drop somebody down. But if you've got authorities like us with a usable reserves, of very minimal usable reserves of, say, £13 million, but you've got authorities, say, at Ronnacon and Taff with £150 million, you've got other big councils with over £100 million of reserves, even neighbours with tens of millions more than us. You can't tell me that funding formula is right, that distribution is right. There is something fundamentally flawed with it. And nobody will really have a look. The minister, previous local government minister, and the current minister said, Peter, you can, we'll put our people on it if you want, but, you as a collective of leaders need to ask us to do that. I ask, a couple of others ask, but a hell of a lot don't want us to ask the question. So it's important that we construct the case for it. And through this motion, Madam Chairman, it's identifying the unfairness of the settlement, it's looking for a flaw, but it's also looking for this council to support me and the Cabinet to continue those robust challenges we're making to get a fair settlement for rural councils like Monmouthshire. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded? Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm going to just add to that, just to clarify some of the disparity here. Now, the leader referred to the 40% that we have to collect through of our funding through council tax. It's 39.4, but I'm certainly not splitting hairs. The reason why I mentioned the actual amount is to point out that last year it was 37.6, so it's getting worse. The Welsh average is 27.2%. If you were in Caerphilly, it's only 20%. So there is really a problem here, and it certainly does need addressing.
Councillor Petroni.
Thank you, Chair. We, on this side, have never said the funding formula is fair. We totally agree. And when I've looked into it, it's about as clear as mud how it works out. But you know what, I'm a stickler for detail. And Councillor Fox, you've said it many a times, the funding formula should be reformed. But two things I would say to you is, one, I've never seen you provide a coherent plan, a logical argument, certainly not presented to the council in any meaningful way other than just words. Where's your plan? There's no point just saying something. You have to come up with a plan to tackle the problem, why it's grossly unfair. And the reason why it's important to do that, actually, is if you look at the sparsity data around the formula, which I unfortunately have, its data is as old as 1991, which obviously Monmouthshire is going to be far sparser in 1991 than it is now. So if you start messing around with stuff, we will actually lose on the sparsity and rurality because we've got more houses compared to 1991. No, but it's one of these factors you have to be careful of. If you can't just willy-nilly, without any plan, say, let's fund a formula. You know, if the council had a unanimously agreed document, this is how we're going to change the funding formula, this is why it's grossly unequal, this is why it disproportionately affects us, here's our plan to remedy it. I think you'll get far more traction than just spouting off every year about the same thing. Because we agree, it's not fair, it doesn't fund Monmouthshire adequately. I even wrote a report saying it doesn't and agree, but we actually come up with a plan of getting extra money for Monmouthshire. And you know what? It's called evidence of why the Welsh Government doesn't adequately fund Monmouthshire. And I talked about the Welsh Index for Multiple Deprivation is a classic case in point. By the way, I'm actually backing you up here, if I can find it on this piece of paper. But basically, I criticised the Welsh Index for Multiple Deprivation for not picking up on the hidden poverty pockets and the inequality within Monmouthshire. This document will not do it. In fact, it says, and I've read it and I've highlighted it, we're the most affluent by a mile on these measures. But I go through it, tackling it line by line, and I'm trying to find it now, of why it is wrong and why they don't cater for Monmouthshire and its future. And of course, typically I can't find it now. But its indicators are weighted against us. For example, on 6.2 on education, it will never pick up the gross inequality in that for us. There's other indicators, which is in the poverty strategy, where it's weighted against us. But this is called looking at why it's weighted against us and doing something about it with evidence, with a coherent strategy. I would have loved to say in this report, actually, to change the RSG. I would have loved to do that. But I know the political reality that you've just described. No, it's not just on politics. It's one Labour council might do better than the other Labour council. It's council versus council. It's not even party political. It is, you'll never change the RSG in the current method of process. You're not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. You can say you're going to try. You can say, I tried, guys. I really did try. But it's never going to happen. So why don't we, with evidence, challenge, because poverty is one of the biggest bases by which councils get given money, one of the biggest. Why don't we challenge the Welsh Government on its formula with proper evidence, with reasoned debate, with a rational, coherent argument? Not every year you saying the same old stuff. You failed on this, Peter. You failed. And look, I'm willing to offer a way forward, right? I absolutely totally agree with the funding formula, agree with everything else you said, but I'll make one amendment. Okay? Calls on the council collectively to make representations. Because I think it'd be far more powerful if it came from all party political groups that Monmouthshire's funding wasn't formula-based. I haven't been here 20 years, to be fair. I've been 17. If I was here at 17, you should have shot me. Council, collectively, we talked about social justice, the need to work forward and move beyond our heated debates. Fine? Okay, fine, fair enough. So let's do it with the funding formula for Welsh Government. The Labour group, and I can't speak for the other groups, but the Labour group will work with you to change the formula using some of the data, some of my analysis, but your officers, your analysis, the Conservative Party's analysis of why it's unfair. But you and the Cabinet just doing it, the same old tactic every year, just talking about it, is not going to work. You've tried, how long have you been leader? 15 years? Not quite. 14. 12 years as leader. 12 years as leader. Has it changed in those 12 years? It's the same tactic you have deployed for 12 years. Change your tactic. Change your tactic. Get cross-party support. Well, if it's a Welsh Labour guy and they're such evil people, get the Labour group on board who agrees with you. Here's my amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak? We are now debating the amendment. Yes, please, Councillor Bushoni, would you do that?
Yes, sure. Calls on the council, so it's the last paragraph, the first sentence of the last paragraph, just amend the beginning bit to calls on the council collectively to make robust representations. All of us, basically.
Proposed and seconded. Do we have anybody wish to comment on it? Councillor, this is on the amendment. Okay, Councillor Powell.
It refers to either or. He was saying, they keep saying that we're well off in Monmouthshire, and it's done because there's more G-band houses in Monmouthshire than the others. Just because you live in a G-band house doesn't mean to say you're wealthy. There are widows and widowers struggling on a pension, living in a band G house. They aren't affluent, but this is how they judge us from the Welsh Government. Yeah, and they want to look at it again. When we were in business, we dealt with a lot of people in a little town called Medlinog. And there were houses there, there were A and B bands. And in lots of them, there were 3 and 4 people from that house going out and earning a wage. Now, can you see that as fair? So they were more affluent than we are in Monmouthshire. I guess my take.
Certainly, the Vice Chairman would like to speak. Acting Vice Chairman.
Yes. The point is emphasised, Dimitri. If you sit on the police committee, Monmouthshire pay disproportionately £2 million more in precept to the police committee because of the mix of our bandage. That means we've got more upper grade houses than lower grades, and that is the unfairness of that settlement. So that's another 2 million we have to find in this place each year that should be paid out by the...
Councillor Higginson.
I'm on the same tack point as Councillor Powell. I had some information some years ago from the late Joy Robson, which stated how many Band A houses there were in Monmouthshire. There were 400 and something of that nature. In Blaen y Gwent, there were 4,400-ish. And as you go up the bands, they were getting less in Band D, E, F, G, H, and the new band that was introduced in 2003-04, Band I, which is upwards of £400,000. And I suspect that because the area where I lived had over 4,000 odd houses in the A and B bands, that is an indication as to why some people are thinking down yonder as to why we should pay more. And I don't agree with that personally, but I'm just explaining to you what it's about. And with respect, I mean, don't take it the wrong way, Peter. I remember John Parker and George Hathaway saying the same thing. I don't know, is Val Smith here? No, she's not. In the mid-90s, when it was the old Mom Borough Council. And it was the same thing then. But what's against us, and Councillor Power is quite correct, we got 400 and some odd, about 440, 450, some of that, band A, B. And an adjacent council go 4,000 odd. So there's a heck of a difference. And I pointed out that as they go up the bands, and the houses that are being built currently in this area are mainly F, G, H, and maybe above that. In band I, the nearest local council, or a local council close by, Blaen y Gwent, had one in band I, and we had 4. And that's about 10 years ago. So the ability to raise money, unfortunately, is dependent upon that, isn't it?
Thank you for the explanation. We'll come back to the motion now. Councillor Davis.
I'll get the hang of this. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I say to the Conservative members, we're not arguing with you at all. Right? We're agreeing with you. And I think Dimitri's amendment makes real sense. It's something that we all want to support. But I have to say, if you look at Dimitri's report about poverty, there is an example on there of how this grant discriminates against the people of Monmouthshire. Right? It's quite clear. We have people living in poverty in Monmouthshire, and this formula does nothing for them at all. So that says to me that we have a case to put forward to say that, look, there is something wrong with this formula. We need to sit down together and go through all the other things within the formula and get a case for it and push it forward. But my personal view is, right, that the only way we'll ever get a change on this is if we have an independent review into it. And that's what we should be calling for, an independent review of the formula. Right? And we must accept that that may not always give us what we want. But I think, you know, Peter, you were confident that, you know, the case is there to be made. And I must say, you know, Dimitri does a lot of research, and so do I. And I've spent many hours looking at this formula. And I'd like to say I understand it, but I certainly don't. Right? But there are far more intelligent people than I on this council that we need to sit down together and go through all the elements of it and say, look, this is the case. We need to call for an independent review of the way that these funds are distributed.
Councillor Watts.
Yes, Chair, I think I would agree, really, that you can be. See, again, I'm in agreement, really, because you can be asset rich and income poor. You know, those people that bought their council houses when, obviously, Thatcher was selling them off cheap many, many years ago. Was true, it was. They were practically giving away to people. And they've got this kind of equity now in the house, and some of those houses are worth, I don't know, and certainly in my ward, they're worth kind of £200,000, £250,000. I'm sure I'll get lots of emails asking me how I kind of evaluated that and why does it say something different on Zoopla. But nevertheless, that is true. The problem that we have is a demographic one. You've had consultants come in here and say the average working age of someone in Monmouthshire is 45. Am I right? Yeah. We need to reduce that to something similar to Cardiff and Newport if we're going to survive. You have to invest in the future, yeah? And so it's a bit like selling season tickets. Every year you want that income in before the Sky money, yeah? Do you see what I mean? So effectively, that's what you've got to do. You've got to start bringing in younger people. And the only way we keep going on about it, it's not a political thing, Peter. It's not that we're ideologically opposed. It's not some undercover Marxist plot. Yeah? It is simply that we believe that building low-cost housing, affordable housing for young people is the way forward because it future-proofs this local authority. So the point is, you've got a problem in what? I'd say, 10, 13 years' time, because I get to 65. Yeah? Believe it or not, 13 years' time, maybe 14, I can't work it out, is that the fact is that, you know, you're going to have to look after people like me. You'll be all right, Peter, because you'll be on your boat fishing for cod or whatever it is, yeah, in Marbella, but I won't be, yeah? And I want to know what you're going to do for people of my generation because you've got a problem. We haven't got enough young people coming through the system. We need to kind of protect the young people we have, and we have to house those people. You have sat on that housing opportunity. You've had Paul Smith come in from Bristol. He's talked to you, explained to you how he's done it.
He's opened the books up. He's explained to you the mistakes that he's made. He's tried to guide you. What have you done? Nothing. You spent £21 million. I've got to be careful when I say it because I know Phil will...
Councillor Watts, I think you're moving off the motion a bit now.
On Spitty Park. But this is the point. You could have invested that money in low-cost housing. You have the land. You can do it.
Point of order, Chair. Can we move to the vote, please?
Sorry, I missed that completely. I just heard a voice coming up. Can you
Point of order, can we move to the vote, please?
Other people have asked to speak, Chairman, before he said that.
Now we've had a proposal for the amendment to be put to the vote. We need to get a seconder and vote on it, please. Second. Councillor Watkins, second. Right, so we can vote on that and whether... On the amendment. On the amendment. Is everybody clear what the amendment is? I think it would be useful.
Right, so my amendment is, to restate it, is on the last paragraph, the first sentence of the last paragraph, calls on the council collectively to make robust representations.
Everybody clear on that one? Right. We will now put it to the vote. This is the vote on the amendment you've just heard from Councillor Petroni. 4. Yeah. Thank you. And against?
Okay, so the amendment is lost.
The amendment is lost. Do we have any abstentions? Thank you. So we'll now go back to the substantive motion and reopen the debate. Councillor Pavia's hand has gone up and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, and my colleague Councillor Davis will back me up on this, to the Leader of the Opposition, that the Economy and Development Select Committee have asked on at least 2 occasions for officers of the WLGA to come in, John Ray and his colleagues, to do a member-wide seminar on understanding the formula. And I hope that can be expedited pretty quickly. So, you know, we are all on the same page on this. But in terms of being cynical, and I've always felt there was a political edge to the funding formula, despite what a number of ministers have said, this belongs to local government, and the subgroup bring the end formula, end product to us to sign off. But just to close, Madam Chair, I think the cat was let out of the bag with the Vale of Glamorgan this year. When you go and see that increase from a percentage that they were about the same as us last year, -1%, to go up to 4.9% in a year when there was a change of cabinet leadership, I think the cat was let out of the bag on that one.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say, obviously, one of the issues on this one is I do fully support this. I do believe that the local government formula does need to be reviewed and looked at very urgently. As everyone knows, we get about 1,000 per head of population, and the average is about 1,300 over the Welsh authorities from the Welsh Government, and some authorities get as much as nearly 1,600 a year per head of population. And the problem is obviously the funding formula is quite complex, and it's been said that people have looked at it and it's very difficult to work it out. And I'm just wondering whether a more simple suggestion would be that the FAR authority actually charges each local authority per head of population. You know, in other words, they do it on a population basis. And in that sense, if the Welsh Government did it on a population basis but didn't make a difference of up to 60% between the levels and had a cap on a deprivation factor of, say, no more than 10%, that might be a very simple way to solve this particular issue, so that we would end up with that all councils would end up with a similar sort of amount of, say, an average of 1,300, and those who got slightly more would be no more than a 10% difference. And I think that would be a very simple way of solving this particular issue. Obviously, those who are getting paid more at the moment would object to that, but maybe it's better to bring everybody up to that level anyway, because of the fact that local government have suffered from a lack of funding, and we all have the same services that we need to provide, and we're doing that on a very tight budget, and it is unfair, this formula, and it does need to be looked at.
Councillor Fox, would you like the right of reply before we put it to the vote? Yeah.
Right.
Nobody else has.
Okay.
Well, nobody else has indicated, so.
Thank you, members, for for all of your support in recognising the issues we face. This isn't just about Monmouthshire. Obviously, we're affected by it massively, the worst affected. There are colleague councils all over the local government family. This isn't a piece of evidence just because Dimitri has written a plan and feels he's a panacea to everything and policy development. This is not necessarily. This is such. You said yourself, the formula is as clear as mud, and that's why I'm pleased that I think in April there is going to be somebody coming along to the select committee to help people at least understand the bones of it. The bigger piece of work now that needs to happen with leaders and cabinet colleagues across Wales is this detailed analysis, the work you're suggesting we should be able to do just in Monmouthshire, this detailed analysis which looks at the whole picture across Wales. And up to recently, I've struggled with getting any traction on that debate. And clearly, Dimitri, you've been a Labour leader connected to the government for so long, right? You could have, if you got any influence over anything, you would have done it, and you clearly haven't. So don't criticise me. You've done nothing. No. So you know, we as a group of leaders across Wales, certainly those who are detrimentally affected, are now we seem to be going to get some traction on analysing and really understanding what are the parameters which are wrong in here. What are the areas that could be adjusted to make things fairer? You know, are there elements which were never catered for in a formula which need to start to be catered for? Is there a need for us to review how much is allocated via population and distribute
put it to the vote, please, Chair.
Against other areas? So there is a deep and important piece of work to go. So we can actually make, as a local government family, certainly parts of the local government family, a real option, a real alternative to at least bring the challenge forward. At the moment, every time I raise it, Labour leaders predominantly don't get near it because they're going to lose money. You've defended that situation in many ways because, you know, your party, you are part of that party. You could be lobbying for this as well, and it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. You've offered to work with me. That's just because you wanted to make a platform here. The reality is you haven't done anything. So, Madam Chairman, the situation is highlighted here, Madam Chairman. I hope the Council can give that support, it seems that they are, that support for us to carry on the fight, to try and get a fairer deal for Monmouthshire, but not just for Monmouthshire, for all of the local government family that is getting massively disadvantaged through the unfairness of this and the fact that several players across Wales just don't want to touch it. And it's unfair. And, Madam Chairman, I move the motion be put as it is.
Thank you. We'll all now vote on the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? The motion has been carried. Thank you all very much. We will now move on to questions. Thank you for your patience. We're nearly there. 2 questions. First of all, Councillor Grocott.
Just as printed with one slight amendment, and I put my hand up and confess,
I should have said a 2% increase, not a 2.5% increase. Decrease, sorry.
Councillor John.
Well, firstly, can I thank the member for his question. As the worst funded local authority in the country, with yet again receiving the deepest, the worst settlement of all 22 councils in the country, our budget consultation for 2020 to 21 has proposed a reduction of 2% in the individual schools budget. This excludes funding for additional learning needs, and I'm quite happy to say today I do not feel comfortable with a proposed 2% reduction in that, but clearly this is a consultation, and you know we would very much like to increase the individual schools budget in addition to meeting the pressures which we have already proposed to do in this budget. We will continue to work closely with schools to identify where savings can be made to ensure that there is minimal impact on standards. The grants for schools distributed through our partners in the Education Achievement Service and the funding for additional learning needs, which support our most vulnerable and needy pupils, is not affected by these proposals. We recognise the financial pressures facing schools, and we proposed to introduce a loan facility which will allow schools to pay back their deficit over a longer period of time, therefore allowing schools to have the resources to maintain their standards and make investments where they see appropriate. That said, Monmouthshire is not alone in experiencing pressures in the school system, with some schools in neighbouring local authorities with significantly greater school deficits. I would urge the Welsh Government to increase its per pupil funding to narrow the funding gap between Wales and England, which currently stands at £645 per pupil, in addition to introducing a floor in the local government funding formula as the leader set out in his motion earlier.
I have a supplementary question, Councillor Grocott.
In asking this, I think I should declare an interest as a member of the governing body at King Henry VIII Comprehensive School. Is the Cabinet member aware that yesterday the head teacher at King Henry VIII School wrote an open letter to all parents at the school that says a reduction of 2% would mean that King Henry School would lose about £75,000 from our budget? And I've checked that with the school's finance person, and she agrees with that. If approved, this would impact on our ability to maintain all aspects of our current core provision. Where's the financial logic of taking the 4 comprehensive schools in this authority, all of which are currently in deficit, and hitting them so badly that they would not be able to sustain the progress and achievement of their pupils, especially the most vulnerable pupils?
Right, I was not copied into that letter, so I haven't seen a copy of it. But as I mentioned in my answer, I do not want to see a reduction of 2% in the money we provide to schools. I am proud of the fact that in recent years, despite the significant financial challenges this authority has faced, greater financial challenges than all the other councils in the country, I would suggest, that we have been able to protect school budgets. We've been very clear that our overriding priority as an administration is to give children the very best possible start in life. We have had to make difficult decisions in previous years, decisions which the opposition have criticised, decisions that we have made, so we've been able to protect school budgets. But you know, that gap that that Councillor Brown mentioned in the motion earlier, that gap between us and the authorities that are that receive the best settlements, that gap is widening year on year, and it's piling on the pressure on authorities like Monmouthshire, and it's forcing us to make some really difficult decisions that we don't want to make. I hope that this 2% reduction that we've proposed in this consultation will not come to pass, but we face some really difficult decisions. We don't want to cut services that the people we represent rely on, but over the next couple of months we're going to have to make some very, very difficult decisions, and there isn't a pot of money that we can tap into. So I hope opposition members would recognise that we probably are, unless the finances change significantly, we probably are going to have to make some decisions that we would rather not make. And this would certainly be one of those.
Councillor Grocott, your second question.
As printed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm responding on behalf of Bob. Bob Green couldn't be here today. You know, he had some heart procedures at the beginning of the week, and he's not fit enough to be here today, but he prepared an answer. So forgive me, I'm going to read it, and thank you, Martin, for supplying the supplementary in advance as well, so I'll respond to that with what I've got. So I can confirm that Monmouthshire planning officers have been in consultation with Brecon Beacons National Park regarding the development of the National Park's LDP preferred strategy, and have provided detailed comments on the candidate site in question. Monmouthshire planning officers will continue to engage with Brecon Beacons National Park and work collaboratively during the development of the LDPs for both authorities to ensure cross-boundary objectives are realised. With regards to this particular candidate site, given the affordability challenges in the Abergavenny housing market area, the objective to provide a high level of affordable housing is welcomed in principle. Notwithstanding this, the Council has raised concerns with the National Park regarding development at this site, raising concerns about access to the site and landscape impact. There are likely to be more sustainable development sites in and adjacent to Abergavenny to meet housing need that should be considered before developing in the National Park. We have raised these concerns directly with the Brecon Beacons National Park, and it would now be for them to consider our comments. We will continue to engage with the National Parks during the development of their LDP, and we will provide comments accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. Could I thank you, Peter, for agreeing to take the supplementary question, and indeed for answering the question that was originally for Bob Green, and I appreciate that you've done that. Thank you. The supplementary question, Chair. If National Park planners give Monmouth Housing Association permission to build their proposed development of primarily social housing at Llwndi, will the County Council take into full account not only the difficulties of developing a suitable infrastructure, but also build into our new local development plan ways of seeking to support the social and economic needs of an enlarged population in North Abergavenny, many of whom will be living below the poverty line and who will find it difficult to access meaningful employment because of their social and geographical isolation?
Thanks, Martin, for that. Officers came back to me on Bob's behalf as soon as you gave me that, which was helpful. So, MCC have raised concerns regarding the inclusion of the site in the National Parks LDP. We will have a further opportunity to comment on the deposit plan stage, if the site remains in their LDP. We support the provision of affordable housing, but believe this should be achieved in mixed, inclusive and accessible communities, and will ensure that the National Park is aware of our position should the site remain in their emerging LDP. Okay.
And you'll be pleased to hear the last item on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the October meeting. Seems like a long time ago now. No hesitation there? Everybody happy? Right. Thank you all very much indeed.